Chapter 114. Dragon! It's a dragon! The students on the ground exclaimed. They are from the Soaring Dragon Academy. In the dark sky, a group of dragons appeared. There were about 20 to 30 of them. They were wearing heavy armor, and only their eyes were visible. Riding on the backs of the dragons, they looked very majestic. The leader of the group was wearing golden armor without a helmet. He had an angular face and was riding a pure-blooded golden flying dragon. He had the strength of a sacred domain expert. He held a long spear in his hand. It was much longer than an ordinary spear, about 3 meters long. At the tip of the spear, there was a dragon pattern engraved on it. He looked like a golden god of war. Soaring Dragon Academy's principal, Golden Dragon Knight Montegot. He was an expert of the sacred domain. The fierce battle in the Balarax Academy had attracted his interest, and he immediately rushed over on his golden flying dragon. Behind him were the instructors of the Soaring Dragon Academy. They were at least at the master level or above. The wyverns they rode were not as pure as Montegot's golden wyvern. For example, the master-level experts rode on eaglebeak wyverns, the master-level experts rode on winged wyverns, and so on. These dragons with impure bloodlines were also called wyverns. Their fighting strength was much lower than the pure-blooded wyverns. However, wyverns still had the bloodline of dragons. Seeing the appearance of Golden Dragon Knight Montegot, a rare smile appeared on Pratz's face. This guy actually came too. It seems like this headless monster has caused a lot of commotion. Montegot calmly sized up the headless corpse. Feeling the powerful pressure coming from it, his expression became serious. He smiled and said, "Old Ghost Pratz, it seems like you have encountered a lot of trouble this time, hee." Pratz smiled. His body slowly rose into the air. He coughed and said, "Our Balarax Academy naturally has a lot of trouble. How can it be as peaceful as your Soaring Dragon Academy? There is no trouble at all. It's not interesting at all." As he said that, he looked at the void with a strange gaze. He faintly said, "Since Golden Dragon Knight Montegot has appeared, another old friend should have appeared as well, right?" Pratz emphasized the words, "old friend." He was referring to something. "Haha. Platz, you old bastard. Seems like your strength has increased a lot." In the sky not far from Platz, a shadow slowly appeared. The newcomer was a short old man with a wretched appearance. He wore a long black robe, and his white beard and long white hair were tied tightly behind his head. He looked extremely shrewd and capable. His hands were crossed in front of his chest, and his hands were hidden in his sleeves. He had a cynical look on his face. He was the current dean of the Hans Academy, the king of assassins, Hill. His appearance was no different from an ordinary wretched old man. His aura was restrained, and in a crowd, no one could tell that he was an expert of the sacred domain. A smile appeared on Platz's face. There was also a hint of helplessness. "You're everywhere. The king of assassins, Hill. His endless and omnipresent assassination methods were impossible to guard against. The most frightening thing was that he was known to have assassinated experts of the sacred domain. In the Noah continent there were very few fights between experts of the sacred domain. This was because everyone cherished the hard-earned glory. After all, if anyone was defeated in a duel, then their entire life as an expert would be covered with a layer of stain. It would make other experts of the sacred domain feel weak, and they would not be able to protect their own interests. There were very few fights between experts of the sacred domain, and even fewer experts of the sacred domain were killed. Generally speaking, in a fight between experts of the sacred domain, if they could not win, they could still escape. However, in the hands of Hill, the king of assassins, they did not even have the chance to escape. This was very thought-provoking. Generally, experts of the sacred domain would try their best not to provoke someone like Hill. Hill's gaze swept across the headless corpse in the air. He indifferently said, "A dead corpse actually has such powerful attack power. It seems like the owner of this body is not simple. As he spoke, he glanced at Platz. His eyes flashed with surprise. Platz, you old bastard, you're actually injured? Platz bitterly smiled. He shook his head and said, I'm not its opponent. Once these words came out, everyone's face revealed a trace of shock. Even the fire mage Saint Platz admitted that he was not the corpse's opponent. Then, just how powerful was this corpse? The King of Assassins, Hill, and the Golden Dragon Knight, Montigot, also had solemn expressions on their faces. Originally, they had thought that it was just a corpse with sanctuary-level strength. Even if it was difficult to deal with, it was not impossible for them to deal with 3 sanctuary-level powerhouses. However, if even Platz was no match for it, the corpse's strength would be extremely terrifying. After a long time, Montigot muttered, Let's work together. This corpse seems to have gone crazy. If we don't deal with it quickly, it will affect our Soaring Dragon Academy sooner or later. Exactly. Platz nodded in agreement. Hill shrugged. Since you've already decided, what else can I say? Although Hill's attitude was extremely negative, his actions were very proactive. With a swish, his figure disappeared in the sky. Boom! The headless corpse was originally accumulating power. Suddenly, its hand swung back and grabbed at the void. Immediately, Hill's figure filled with killing intent appeared. He was actually the first to attack the headless corpse. Good heavens, this corpse's strength is very strong. Hill's sneak attack failed. He immediately stopped underestimating the headless corpse. He understood that even though they were all experts of the sacred domain, the gap between them was still very large. Let's go together. Montigot and Platz looked at each other. Hill's attack was like the horn of war. The two of them attacked together. Flying Dragon Assault. Montigot raised his dragon spear that was over 3 meters high. The golden flying dragon under him spread its wings and rushed towards the headless corpse like an arrow. Platz also moved. He waved his dark gold staff, and countless high-level fire spells were thrown at the headless corpse as if they were free. A murderous intent flashed in Hill's eyes. His wide sleeves fluttered even though there was no wind, revealing a pair of small, white hands. Those were his hands, the hands of the King of Assassins, Hill. It was this pair of small, nimble, jade-like hands that made Hill, the King of Assassins, famous for his fighting prowess. Hill held a dagger in his hand. It was unknown what material this dagger was made of. It flickered in and out of existence. At a glance, it looked like his hand was empty. Montigot looked and turned pale with fright. It's the Shadow Blade. The Saint Weapon Shadow Blade is actually in your hands? Hill smiled. I don't know what Shadow Blade is. These are just 2 small knives I casually picked up. As he spoke, he didn't stop moving. In one breath, he stabbed the headless corpse over 100 times. Boom, boom, boom. With the 3 sacred domain powerhouses attacking together, the headless corpse was quickly at a disadvantage. No matter how strong it was, even if it had the divine energy of destruction, it was still just a sacred domain powerhouse after being refined into a zombie. Facing the combined attacks of 3 sacred domain powerhouses, it was getting more and more strenuous. The wounds on its body continued to increase, most of which were Hill's work. Hill's speed was extremely fast, and the frequency of his attacks was the highest, but his lethality was nothing to be proud of. He could only leave shallow wounds on the headless corpse. What depressed him the most was that this was a headless corpse. It was already dead, and there were no vital points. If he wanted to cut its throat, it didn't have a throat. If he wanted to stab its heart had stopped beating long ago. This made Hill so anxious that he was scratching his head, not knowing what to do. The battle between the 3 sacred domain powerhouses shocked all of Ballarat. In the sky above Ballarat's academy, streaks of red, gold, and black energy flashed one after another, shocking the students, teachers, and residents of the various academies. Ron calmed his pounding heart and asked Homelin, Grandpa Homelin, The headless corpse shouldn't be a match for them now, right? Homelin pondered for a moment. Yes. At this stage, the uncontrollable zombie's potential has been exhausted. There's no way it can advance any further. It's only a matter of time before it fails. Ron was overjoyed. That's great. The Academy is saved. Homelin sighed softly. Ron still didn't understand how difficult it was to obtain the headless corpse. It was only using 25% of its original strength, yet it could already fight 3 sacred domain powerhouses to such an extent. If its head could be found and its strength recovered to 50%, even 3 sacred domain powerhouses wouldn't be a match for it. If its original body came back to life, it would be able to crush 3 sacred domain powerhouses with a single finger. Homelin would be lying if he said he didn't feel heartache for the zombie he had painstakingly created. Just how great of an opportunity did one have to be to obtain the corpse of a god, even if it didn't have a head? But then again, there was no point in giving Ron a headless corpse that he couldn't control. His strength hadn't reached that level yet, so the headless corpse wouldn't listen to him. It would be a tragedy if he was accidentally killed by the zombie. The students on the ground stared at the sky, afraid that they would miss a single detail. Their eyes were filled with envy and deep admiration. The same thought appeared in their minds. So powerful. It would be great if I could reach this level one day. The headless corpse was covered in wounds, but other than that, its strength hadn't decreased at all. Prats, Hill, Montegot, and the others were also covered in wounds. Under the headless corpse's reckless attacks, it was impossible for them to come out unscathed. Damn it! Didn't you guys notice that after fighting for so long, that guy's strength hasn't decreased at all? Hill said angrily. As a thief, his endurance wasn't good. He was most afraid of encountering such a difficult opponent. It's divine power, Prats replied. It seems that it's supported by a powerful divine power, which is why its strength hasn't decreased. Chapter 115. I don't know. Prats shook his head. This guy looks like a human, but there are no longer any divine domain experts among the humans. It might be someone from history, but I don't know who it is. Hill clenched his teeth and said fiercely, What I'm more interested in is, who revived this guy? No one answered, because no one knew the answer. Even Prats did not know why this headless monster suddenly appeared. Montegot yelled, The destruction caused by our battle is too strong. We have to lure him to higher ground, or else the ground will be destroyed. Okay. Prats and Hill replied in unison. The 3 figures retreated as they fought, and soon rose into the sky. The fearless headless corpse kicked off with both legs and chased after them like an arrow. They flew away. A student said as he formed a tent with his hands and looked up. They probably don't want to cause too much damage. After all, their battle strength is too strong. Another student said. Homelin looked at the sky and muttered, They can fight to this extent without any weapons. This corpse is really amazing. The headless corpse did not have any weapons, while the other 3 had at least dark gold-grade equipment. Some even had more than one. The 3 had already risen into the air, and were fighting fiercely in midair. At this time, Prats yelled, You guys delay him. Give me some time, I'm going to cast a forbidden spell. Forbidden spell? Hill and Montegot were stunned, and a serious look flashed in their eyes. The power of a forbidden spell was enough to destroy the world. They knew that Prats was going to use his trump card. Hill could not help but laugh and scold. Prats, you old geezer, only now do you remember to cast a forbidden spell? What were you doing earlier? As he spoke, the frequency of his attacks increased, forcing the headless corpse into a panic. Montego's dark gold dragon spear wasn't to be outdone either. His powerful earth elemental fighting aura coupled with his saint-level strength caused several terrifying wounds to appear on the headless corpse's body. Prats ignored the 2 and focused on gathering the fire elements in the air. Land of fire that surges in the depths of the earth, I pray to you in the name of a devout believer. Burn, bird of the fire god, turn everything before you into an ocean of fire. Even Hill and Monty Got, who were far away, could feel the heat around Prats. Prats waved his magic staff, and powerful fire elements quickly gathered, turning into a giant firebird. The firebird flapped its wings and let out a soft cry that shook the 9 heavens. Hill and Monty Got were shocked. What's going on? This old bastard's strength has increased by quite a bit. The headless corpse paused for a moment. It seemed to have sensed the increasing pressure coming from the blazing firebird. Go! An awakened flaming bird. Prats's eyes flashed. He pointed his magic staff, and the flaming bird floating in the air turned into a stream of light and flew towards the headless corpse. Hee. Hill looked up to the sky and laughed. Prats, you old bastard, I'll leave now. The rest is up to you. With that, his figure disappeared into the air. Monty Got also rode his golden flying dragon and left. The flaming bird was extremely fast, and it crashed into the headless corpse. In that instant, time seemed to have stopped. Then, with a boom, it was as if a huge sun had appeared in the sky. It shone brightly, and the dark night sky instantly turned bright. Beautiful sparks bloomed in the sky. The powerful explosion spread over 10 miles. The power in the sky also caused slight tremors on the ground. Too shocking. Is this the power of a forbidden spell? Ron looked at the sky in a daze. Mages are still so powerful, Homelin smiled proudly. The power of this spell is not bad. It's almost 80% of my strength back then. Ron was shocked. Grandpa Homelin, you were so powerful back then? How strong were you? Homelin hesitated for a moment before softly saying, Peak of the sacred domain? After the powerful explosion, the dark sky regained its calm. It was so calm that it was as if nothing had happened. The powerful headless corpse had long since disappeared. It's dead? Hill asked. He looked around, but the headless corpse was nowhere to be seen. No. Prats shook his head. It ran away. What? Montagot's eyes flashed with shock. He took a deep breath and calmly replied, We actually couldn't kill it. That means we'll never have a day of peace. It was no wonder that Montagot thought the headless corpse was an ordinary expert from the sacred domain. In reality, it was just a corpse. That guy has lost his mind. His attacks are just instincts. He might not continue to attack us, Hill said softly. However, he still had lingering fears of the headless corpse's strength. If it returned, Hill alone would not be able to deal with it. I hope so, Pratt said. He looked at the destroyed academy below and lost interest in talking. Since it ran away, I have nothing to worry about. If it comes back, let me know. That's right. With the 3 of us working together, there's no need to be afraid of it. Montagot nodded. There were plenty of conflicts between experts from the sacred domain, but when faced with external threats, cooperation was always the main goal. After all, they were all in Balarax. The 2 of them bid farewell to Prats and led their men back. At this moment, the sky was already slightly bright, and Prats's figure slowly descended. Dean! Dean! The teachers of the academy came forward to welcome him. Among them, Darbus smiled and said, Dean, your strength has already broken through to the 5th layer of the sacred domain. Congratulations! 5th layer of the sacred domain. Prats forced a smile. I'm already at the 6th layer of the sacred domain. The restoration of Balarax Academy was carried out in an orderly manner. The fierce battle with the headless corpse was mostly in the air, so the damage on the ground was not serious. With the Academy's financial resources, it was completely affordable. On the morning of the same day, Prats met Ron in his independent office. Darbus and a few other teachers were with him. There was a small office desk with a few chairs below it. The furnishings of the office were relatively simple, not much different from an ordinary teacher's office. If not for the words, Dean's Office, written on the pearwood door outside, No one would associate it with the office of an expert from the sacred domain. Pratt's did not like luxury. This was something everyone in the academy knew. Pratt sized up Ron with great interest. He wanted to know how a necromancer who was called trash could injure so many students. None of these students were ordinary people. There were even high-ranked professionals among them. Ron stood in front of Pratt's, somewhat uneasy. Although this was not the first time he had come into contact with an expert from the sacred domain, he felt that the dean's eyes could see through his body. The senses of experts from the sacred domain were extremely sharp. Hamelin did not want to bring trouble to Ron, so he entered the soul ring early to sleep. "You are Ron?" Pratt asked with a smile. He recognized this person as the one who helped him up from the ground when he was injured yesterday. "Yes, Dean." Ron nodded. At this time, Darbus quickly walked in front of Pratt. "Sir Dean, Vivian is here." Pratt nodded. Vivian was wearing a gray-black magic robe. Her slightly curly hair was naturally draped behind her head. She quickly walked in, and when she passed by Ron, she gave him a strange look. "Sir Dean." Vivian bowed deeply. "Ha ha." Pratt laughed heartily. "Vivian, this student of yours is much stronger than you." Pratt was very familiar with Vivian. This was thanks to her father, Jared. When the Academy decided to abolish the necromancy major, it was Pratt who objected and suppressed the matter. Vivian was excited. She knew that the dean did not have any ill intentions. The dean took the initiative to ask to see Ron, indicating that he cared about the necromancy major. She took a deep breath and nodded with a smile. "Of course, Ron is a true ancient necromancer." "Ancient necromancer?" Vivian's words were like a bomb that shocked everyone. The teachers looked at each other, not daring to believe this fact. Even Pratt's face was filled with shock. Ron's expression was calm, but his heart was in turmoil. His identity was completely exposed. He did not know if the Roland Empire would kill him as a heretic like the Holy Roman Empire. Pratt was shocked. "Vivian, the ancient necromancy you speak of is not a legend?" "No." Vivian glanced at Ron. "Ancient necromancy really did exist. Ron is its successor." "Successor?" Dabbs asked with a surprised tone. "Ron, is this true?" Ron knew that he could not hide it any longer. He showed his full strength. Anyone who had fought with him before would know the difference between an ancient necromancer and a modern necromancer. He took a deep breath. "That's right, I'm the ancient necromancer you're talking about." Vivian's eyes lit up. She looked at Ron with a smile. She finally heard Ron admit it. As a necromancer, nothing was more exciting than seeing ancient necromancy. Ron thought for a moment and said, "But in my eyes, there is no such thing as ancient necromancy or pornographic novels. The difference between necromancy magic and necromancy magic is that there is only one type of necromancy magic. The popular necromancy magic is wrong." "Indeed." Pratt nodded. "Necromancy has been lost for a long time. It was only rediscovered by Master Khan about 5,000 years ago. I think that after 10,000 years, a lot of necromancy books have been lost. In the end, they only managed to create the David's Deer. There are no real ancient necromancers at this time, so naturally, no one can point out the errors of necromancy. In the end, it became what it is today. Vivian, is that right?" Ron raised his head in astonishment. He didn't expect Dean Pratt to be able to deduce the truth so accurately just from a few clues. "Yes, Headmaster." Vivian was deeply impressed by Pratt. She had researched for 10 years before coming to this conclusion, but Pratt had hit the nail on the head. Chapter 116. Ron hesitated in the face of everyone's heated gazes. If he wanted to reveal this secret, he had to reveal the existence of Hamelin's grandfather. He knew that Hamelin's grandfather must have heard what they were saying, but he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping them. It seemed like he wanted to leave the decision to him. Ron thought for a while and finally made up his mind. He shook his head and said, I'm sorry, I can't say. A trace of disappointment appeared on everyone's faces when they heard these words. The most disappointed among them was Vivian. Ron's words were extremely valuable to the study of necromancy magic. How dare you? There's no room for you to hide anything in front of Dean Prats. At this time, the old female mentor who had been opposing Ron stood up and said angrily, "Boy, you'd better tell us what you know, or else." The old woman's face trembled, her expression full of threat. "I'm sorry, I can't say." Ron repeated this sentence again. The difference was that his gaze was very firm this time. He stared at the old woman, unwilling to back down. "You!" The old woman was so angry that her mouth was crooked. She didn't expect Ron to dare talk back to her. She felt that her dignity as a mentor was being challenged. She immediately took out her magic staff from the dimensional bag at her waist, wanting to teach this arrogant kid a lesson. "Stop!" Platz's voice sounded in her ear. It wasn't loud, but there was an unquestionable tone to it. The old woman was shocked. She knew that things were bad. The dean was sitting right there. Since when was it her turn to make the decision? She immediately changed her tone. "I'm sorry, Dean. I was too agitated." "You weren't agitated. You went a little overboard." Platz's voice was a little louder, obviously with a trace of dissatisfaction. "Everyone has their own secret. Is forcing him to tell us something that a mentor should do?" The old woman's face was full of shame. "I'm sorry, Dean." The small disturbance passed just like that. Ron knew that Platz didn't intend to force him and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Platz's gaze fell on the table. Ron's file was on the table. He reached out and picked it up. Name: Ron. Gender: male. Age: 15. Profession: necromancer. Prats read through the lines one by one. When his gaze landed on "from where," his eyes suddenly widened. He raised his head and asked in disbelief, "You're from the Holy Roman Empire?" Ron nodded. "Yes." Prats was even more shocked. "Isn't the Holy Roman Empire forbidden to practice necromancy magic? Once discovered by the Holy See, they will be executed immediately." Ron said calmly, "Yes, I fled to the Roland Empire because I was being hunted down by the Holy See." Prats looked at Ron. "Seems like you've suffered a lot in order to practice necromancy. It's not easy to escape from the Holy See." Ron took a deep breath and looked at Prats. "Dean Prats, the Roland Empire is known as the Free Kingdom. How will you deal with me?" As he spoke, Ron secretly put his hand in his portal bag, ready to attack at any time. If anything went wrong, he would fight with his life on the line. However, there were several masters and masters in the dean's office. In addition, the dean was a master of the sacred domain. Even with the help of Homelin's grandfather, he didn't have much of a chance of winning. That was why he used words to provoke Dean Prats. Wasn't the Roland Empire known as the Free Kingdom? Why couldn't necromancers be tolerated? Prats smiled. He knew that this student was still wary. He smiled and said, "Ron, don't worry. The Roland Empire is known as the Free Kingdom. Naturally, we won't reject necromancers like the Holy Roman Empire. Don't you see? Necromancers can be found everywhere on the street. Of course, these necromancers are completely different from you. As for myself, I don't have any prejudice against necromancers, whether it's ancient necromancy magic or modern necromancy magic. Also, some people have mentioned the abolition of the necromancy major. I won't agree to this, so don't worry." Dean Prats's words dispelled Ron's doubts. He let out a sigh of relief and gently put down his hand in his portal bag. "Thank you, Dean." Vivian bowed deeply and said. Hearing Prats's words, the happiest person was Vivian. Regarding the abolition of the necromancy major, she had looked for Vice Dean Dabbs many times, but to no avail. Now that Prats had spoken, who would dare to oppose? This matter was truly set in stone. At this time, Dabbs was silent for a moment. He stood up and said to Prats, Dean, I have to remind you that, if our academy continues to take in Ron, we might become enemies with the Holy See. Pratt frowned. What's going on? Vice Dean Dabbs bowed deeply. Dean, ever since Ron was involved in the fight, I was deeply shocked by his strength. One person, one against more than 100 professionals, and a necromancer who was called trash. Under normal circumstances, this should be impossible. I felt that something was amiss, so I specially sent people to the Holy Roman Empire to understand the situation. According to the news from the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy See values Ron to the point that they are willing to do anything. They even sent powerhouses from the sacred domain to personally pursue Ron. Powerhouses from the sacred domain? This sentence shocked everyone in the room. Sending a powerhouse from the sacred domain to pursue a necromancer, it was clear how important Ron was to the Holy See. Moreover, Ron being able to escape from a powerhouse from the sacred domain was even more impressive. However, Ron knew that if it wasn't for Shea's grandfather, the aqua-blue sword Saint Corbett, who stopped Commander Wharton of Guangming, he would have turned into a skeleton by now. Dabbs sighed. Just a few days ago, I received a letter signed by a private individual requesting us to hand Ron over to the Holy See. The signature was the Hall Master of the Holy See's Hall of Piety, Commander Wharton of Guangming. Wharton? It's him? Platts frowned. He wasn't unfamiliar with the powerhouses from the sacred domain in the Noah continent. Wharton had dealt with him more than once. Platts snorted and said, "Isn't the Holy See's reach too far? I don't care if they ban necromancy in the Holy Roman Empire, and I don't care about their pursuit of necromancers, but is it their place to interfere with the matters of the Roland Empire?" Yes. Dabbs sighed. At that time, I decided to ignore it. After all, the Balrog's Academy is also one of the top academies in the continent. Although the Holy See is powerful, it's not enough to scare us. At that time, the fight hadn't happened yet, and I was wondering why they valued Ron so much when there were so many necromancers in the Roland Empire. Now I understand. I personally feel that Ron, an ancient necromancer, means a lot to the Holy See. So, Mr. Dean, I have to remind you that taking in Ron isn't something that can be done with just a word. You may have to pay a price. Platts's gaze froze, and he was silent for a long time before he said, "What do you mean?" Dabbs's voice once again sounded like a pornographic novel. "Mr. Dean, if we directly hand Ron over to the Holy See, it will damage the dignity of our academy and the Roland Empire. It will make it seem like we're afraid of them. So, after careful consideration, I've decided to use this fight to expel Ron from the academy. This way, Ron's matter will have nothing to do with our academy, and it will be acceptable on the surface." The other mentors were calm, as if they felt that this was the right thing to do. Only Vivian's face was deathly pale. However, this was human nature. Taking in Ron wouldn't bring much benefit to the academy, but it would mean a lot to the Holy See. Taking him in was equivalent to making an enemy out of the Holy See. Dabbs's words weren't wrong from the academy's point of view. Ron now understood that the Holy See's influence and strength were too great. The academy wanted to expel him, but perhaps the academy wasn't afraid of the Holy See. No one would be foolish enough to offend the Holy See for a student. He sighed in his heart. In the end, this world was still all about strength. If he was strong enough to reach the level of a powerhouse in the sacred domain, the academy wouldn't even be able to take him in, let alone take him in. So what if he was a necromancer? Mr. Dean Platts, Vice Dean Dabbs, Mentor Vivian, and all the other mentors, Ron said and bowed deeply to everyone. "I'm indebted to all of you for taking care of me during this period, and I've caused trouble for all of you. I'm sorry." Ron straightened up and glanced at everyone. Those powerful mentors blushed and lowered their heads deeply. "So, in order to avoid causing trouble for the academy, I've decided to apply for withdrawal." As soon as he said this, the entire office fell into a dead silence. Only Vice Dean Dabbs and the other mentors heaved a sigh of relief. Although the academy had expelled a student because of the fight, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that there would be many people gossiping about it because of the Holy See. Now that the student had applied for withdrawal, the matter was much easier to handle. Dabbs cast a grateful look at Ron. His gaze contained a trace of imperceptible apology. Vivian, on the other hand, had an anxious look on her face as she desperately signaled to Ron with her eyes. Ron, our academy didn't handle this matter well. But don't worry, we'll make it up to you. I hope you'll be satisfied, Dabbs said apologetically. There's no need. Goodbye. Ron's mind was in a mess, and he didn't want to say anything more. He took a deep breath, turned around, and strode out. The dean's office was dead silent. The crisp footsteps fell on everyone's hearts, making them feel incomparably heavy. Ron's eyes were filled with determination. If there was no place for him to stay, there would be other places for him to stay. There wouldn't be a problem if he left the Balarax Academy, or even the Roland Empire. The Noah continent was so big, there was no need to worry about not finding a place to stay. Even if he went to the mountains and forests to train, with the guidance of Grandpa Homelin, would the results be bad? Stop! When Ron was about to reach the door, a dull voice sounded. Ron stopped in his tracks and turned around. He calmly asked, Dean Platts, is there anything else? Platts snorted coldly. Ron, what do you think the Balarax Academy is? You think you can come and go as you please? Platts slowly raised his head, and his lips curled into a sly smile. Without a graduation certificate personally signed by me, you can't take a single step out of the academy. Chapter 117. Darbus was shocked. Dean, you don't have to say anything. I understand very well. Platts waved his hand and said resolutely. At the same time, he interrupted Darbus. I'll say it again. No matter how powerful the Holy See is, they can't control the Roland Empire. The Roland Empire is known as the Free Kingdom for a reason. Darbus was silent. Dean. At this time, the old woman who had been silent all this time stood up and looked at Ron fiercely. Dean, don't you think that Ron's necromancy magic has a strange smell? Evil magic like this shouldn't exist in this world. I still think that expelling him would be beneficial to the academy. Platts laughed. What is justice? What is evil? Is there absolute justice and evil in this world? Let me tell you, there isn't. Even among the students of the Balarax Academy, there are many who practice righteous magic and do evil things. Justice and evil are all in one heart. Mathesia, what you're saying now, what's the difference between you and the Holy See? Ron couldn't help but applaud in his heart. Platts's words were so right that it warmed his heart. He looked at the old woman teacher strangely and realized that her name was Mathesia. Mathesia was speechless. She resentfully shut her mouth. Seeing that he had convinced everyone, Platts was in a good mood. He smiled and said, Then it's settled. Ron, I don't care how you inherited the ancient necromancy magic. Since you've entered the necromancy department, you're my student. You can stay and continue to practice your necromancy magic. As for the Holy See, you don't have to worry about it. I'll handle it. Thank you, Dean. Ron saluted sincerely, his heart incomparably moved. He knew what Platts's words meant. This meant that the Balarax Academy was protecting his safety and holding up the blue sky for him. This favor could not be said to be small. Platts glanced at Ron and laughed. But Ron, you're still too weak. You're only a high soldier, right? He saw through Ron's strength with a single glance. Ron's heart trembled. Yes, Sir Dean. Platts smiled. Work hard. When your strength reaches the master rank, I'll let you teach the necromancy major. Ron's eyes lit up. Really? He knew that Homelin's grandfather's greatest wish was to rebuild the Scourge Church, and what was needed to rebuild the Scourge Church. It would undoubtedly require a large number of necromancers, death knights, and undead assassins. If the Balarax Academy could provide such a platform, why not? Ron, this favor is too heavy. After leaving the dean's office, Ron told Homelin about the matter. Homelin quickly fell silent. To be able to protect Ron before he matured and bear the pressure alone, severing the thoughts of the Holy See, this favor was indeed too great. Yes, Grandpa Homelin, Ron continued. He also said that when I break through to the master rank, he'll let me teach the necromancy major. I agreed. Homelin nodded. This is an opportunity. I estimate that with your current cultivation speed, you'll be able to break through to the master rank in 2 years. Ron was shocked. 2 years. Of course. Breaking through from the high soldier rank to the master rank is a hurdle. Countless people are stuck at this hurdle, and some are unable to break through in their entire lives. But with my guidance, 2 years should be enough, Homelin said. The two chatted along the way and soon returned to room 302. It was already noon, and Ron was already feeling hungry. Ron is back. This news spread like a gust of wind throughout the campus. For a moment, room 302 was once again packed with people. Previously, because Ron had been taken care of by Shea, it could be said that he had reluctantly become the boss because of Shea's face. Many powerful freshmen were disdainful of him, but now they truly acknowledged his strength. When Ron pushed open the door of room 302, he was shocked by the neat crowd inside. The entire room was filled with people, and everyone had a smile on their faces. Among them were the few people from room 302. Fatty, Lantry, Karachi, Rum, Manny, and so on. They neatly lined up in 2 rows and shouted, "Welcome, Boss Ron." Bo. Boss? Ron was shocked by this word. When did he become someone like Heefles? Of course, Boss Ron. Fatty Gid approached with a smile and patted Ron on the shoulder. From today onwards, you are our boss. Not only are you the boss of room 302, but you are also the boss of us freshmen. The boss of the freshmen? Ron was stunned. He smiled bitterly and said, This, second fifth brother, you can't play like this. Ron was very clear-headed. There were a lot of talents among the freshmen, and there were even a few high-level professionals. Why should it be his turn? Besides, his duty in the Balarax Academy was to quietly practice and learn some knowledge. He had never thought of being the boss. Fatty's eyes widened. What do you mean? We're serious. As he spoke, he shouted behind him. Come, come, come. Everyone, shout again. 1, 2, 3, Boss Ron. Everyone shouted in unison and bowed deeply at the same time. Ron was speechless. He quietly pulled second fifth brother, who was ranked 7th, to the side and muttered in a low voice, Second fifth brother, can I not be the boss? What? You're still not satisfied with the boss? Fatty rolled his eyes. Being the boss is very impressive. Think about it, you can do anything, and hundreds will respond to your call. If you want money, someone will give it to you. If you want homework, someone will copy it. If you want a fight, it will be settled with just a word. You can casually gather a group of people. Most importantly, if you're the boss of the academy, there will be a lot of girls waiting for you to pick up. Pornographic novels? It's not that I'm not satisfied, but what does being the boss do? I don't know how to do it, Ron said, sweating. Fatty smirked. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to do it, I can help you do it. Like developing subordinates or something like that, Recruiting people is my strength. As the boss, you only need to do one thing well. What thing? Actually, it's nothing much. Fatty smiled and quietly moved closer to his ear. It's just that sometimes in a fight it's inevitable that there will be some thorny problems. When the time comes, Ron, you just need to take action. Like Heefles or something. Ron was stunned. What? At this moment, Fatty suddenly grabbed Ron's hand and shouted, Now Ron has finally agreed to be our boss. Everyone, clap and welcome him. Clap, clap, clap. All the freshmen clapped and said, "Boss Ron, you can do it! Welcome, Boss Ron! 1 against 100. Damn it, isn't it?" Ron was completely stunned. He was pulled by Fatty to the table in the hall and looked down at the freshmen. Ron noticed that the freshmen's faces revealed a fanatical expression. Fatty stood on the table and said proudly, "Today, our guild is finally established." Right, what's the name of our guild?" He turned his head and asked Ron. Ron shook his head. His mind was still dizzy and he still hadn't woken up. Since the boss didn't say anything, only Fatty, who was his assistant, could think. He muttered to himself for a moment and suddenly slapped his head. "Got it, our boss is a necromancer. How about we call it the Skull Association?" "Good, good." The freshmen below the stage all echoed in agreement. Ron thought for a moment. Skull Association, this name isn't bad. "Good, Boss Ron has agreed," Fatty shouted. "From today onwards, our guild will be called the Skull Association." Thunderous applause came from below as the freshmen cheered loudly. Fatty's face was flushed red. He was already deeply immersed in his perfect performance. His body of fat was constantly shaking. "Today is the joyous day of the establishment of our Skull Association. Next, let's invite Boss Ron to speak for us." The freshmen clapped their hands, making crackling sounds. Ron rarely experienced such a scene. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He couldn't help but pull on Fatty's clothes. I don't know how to speak. I don't even know what to say." "It's okay if you don't know how to speak." Fatty blinked his left eye and made an okay gesture. He waved his hand and said loudly, "Just now Boss Ron told me that he doesn't know how to speak." "This is okay, Fatty can speak for him." But everyone asked again, "Fatty can speak eloquently, so why can't you choose Fatty to be your boss?" He stretched out a finger. "Because Fatty, I don't have as strong strength as him." Boss Ron fought 1 against 100 in the corridor and injured many of them, but he himself came out unscathed. This kind of strength, everyone has seen it for themselves. Fatty was at the table giving a speech without stopping. It had to be said that Fatty really did have a talent for language and speaking skills. As expected of someone who came from a merchant family, he successfully stirred up the atmosphere of the entire room 302. At this moment, the door of the girls' room in room 302 was suddenly pushed open. A pretty figure walked out. She was dressed in martial attire and stood in front of everyone. She wore a feathered crown on her head, leather boots on her feet, and a woman's hard leather armor. She held a quiver in one hand and a longbow in the other. It was a standard combat equipment. The whole room quieted down. Ron opened his mouth wide. "Oh, Aurora, the person who came was Aurora." Her face was expressionless. You couldn't tell if she was happy or angry. She glanced at Ron and said, "Ron, come out with me." Ron was stunned. He stuttered and asked, "What for?" "To test your strength." Aurora coldly threw down this sentence. She squeezed through the crowd in front of her, opened the door and walked out. There was a moment of silence. Then, room 302 cheered again. Okay, there's a good show to watch. Boss Ron is going to show his strength. Can he win? Aurora has the title of Archer God. The freshmen began to discuss. Ron and Fatty looked at each other. At this time, Ron asked, "Second, fifth brother, should I go?" "Go, why not?" Fatty pushed Ron and smiled. "This is a great opportunity for you to show your strength in front of your subordinate. Besides, can you not go? I dare say that Aurora will never let you go." Chapter 118. Ron nervously stood in the middle of the field, looking at Aurora with a guilty conscience. They were surrounded by a dense crowd, looking at Ron with eyes full of expectation. It was still Ron who spoke first, stuttering as he said, "Oh, Aurora, must we fight?" Aurora calmly flicked the bowstring and said, "Since we're already here, why are you still talking so much nonsense? As she spoke, her charming eyes swept across the crowd and raised her voice to berate, "Why are you all standing so close to each other? Get the hell away from me, my arrows don't have eyes." Only then did those freshmen remember that Aurora was an archer, and immediately ran far away, all hiding behind cover. Among them, Fatty ran the fastest. Aurora calmly raised her head and said indifferently, "Ron, in this battle, I won't hold back. Bring out your strength to fight against 100 people. I want to see if your strength can let our dormitory squeeze into the top 50 in the ranking tournament." Top 50, as long as they were in the top 50, it would be enough. But for dormitory 302, this was an impossible task. There were only 7 people in dormitory 302, and they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. In addition, other than Aurora's strength and Manny's strength, the others could not be counted on. Aurora had calculated that if Ron really had the strength to fight against 100 people, it was still possible for him to enter the top 50. Of course, she did not dare to hope for him to enter the top 50. "All right." Ron nodded, and the space bag in his hand flashed, and a short bone staff appeared in his hand. Aurora's lips curled into a smile, and suddenly, her smile disappeared. She quickly raised the longbow in her hand, and with a whoosh, she quickly shot an arrow. Bone shield. Ron raised the bone staff in his hand, and a bone shield appeared in front of him, blocking Aurora's arrow. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Aurora quickly moved, and shot several arrows while moving. Her figure constantly changed, but none of her arrows missed. Amazing! As expected of the god of archery, Aurora. He truly lives up to his name. Her basic skills are so solid. Boss Ron is also very powerful. Ron held the bone shield in his hand and looked at the direction of the arrows. He blocked all the arrows shot by Aurora. A smile finally appeared on Aurora's face. "Not bad. You do have some strength, but you have to be careful. I'm going to get serious." With that, Aurora moved her hands, and a wave of magic appeared in her palms. She pulled the bow into a full moon, and the arrow on the bow emitted a faint white light. Whoosh! An arrow imbued with magical power shot out. The arrow pierced through the air like a whistle and headed straight for Ron. Ron did not dare to be negligent and raised his shield to block. Boom! Something unexpected happened. The bone shield that Ron summoned was shattered by Aurora's arrow. The bone armor splashed, and fragments fell to the ground. Ron rolled on the ground, avoiding his original position. He muttered an incantation, and his body emitted strands of black soul energy. Skeleton warriors! In the blink of an eye, the skeleton warriors scrambled to get out of the ground with huge shields in their hands. There were at least 7 or 8 of them. Their eyes flashed with a faint green light as they opened their mouths and let out angry roars that shook the soul. "Go!" Ron pointed with his bone staff, and the skeleton warriors rushed towards Aurora. Summoning these pornographic novels? Are these useless skeletons? Aurora was like everyone else. She did not put these skeletons in her eyes, thinking that they were only vicious on the outside. She knocked an arrow on her bow once more and shot it straight at the skeleton hero who was leading the charge. Something unexpected happened. The skeleton warrior raised its shield and blocked Aurora's arrow, leaving it unharmed. How is this possible? Aurora turned pale with fright. Aurora was not the only one who was shocked. The spectating freshmen were also shocked. The skeletons that they thought would be unable to withstand a single blow were actually incomparably nimble, blocking Aurora's arrow. Boss Ron is so strong. Is this the power of a necromancer? A freshman's eyes were full of stars. Aurora's body was extremely nimble. The skeleton warriors wearing heavy armor could not catch up to her. She jumped up and down and pulled away from them. Homing arrow. Aurora gritted her teeth and shot out a homing arrow. A white light quickly rose into the air. The skeleton warriors raised their shields in unison, but the homing arrow seemed to have grown eyes. It made an inconceivable turn and headed straight for them. Boom! One of the skeleton warriors was hit in the head and fell to the ground, wobbling. Ron lightly tapped the bone staff in his hand. How about another batch? Another batch of skeleton warriors stood up, increasing their number to 18. Aurora snorted coldly. Do you think that it's enough just because you have more people? Watch me use my exploding arrow. She didn't even think. A golden arrow shot out. The arrow carried with it an intense flame power that seemed to burn the air. Boom! A large number of skeleton warriors were knocked to the ground in an instant. The explosive arrows were powerful and had a large area of effect, but the damage they dealt was much less. The skeleton warriors were blasted to pieces, and some of them were missing limbs. But don't forget that the skeleton warriors were creatures that did not feel pain or fear. As long as they could fight, they would not disappear into thin air. The skeleton warriors staggered back to their feet. Aurora alternated between exploding arrow and multi-arrow. Every time she shot out an arrow, a large number of skeleton warriors would fall. They would struggle to get back up and attack Aurora again. The students were stunned. A freshman said, "So this is a necromancer? It looks like Miss Aurora can't do anything to these skeletons." Another said, "Yeah, Boss Ron is really amazing." Most of the freshmen lowered their heads and thought about it. If they were in the same situation, they would also be helpless. Although these skeletons looked strange, their defense was surprisingly high. If Aurora's arrows weren't enchanted, they probably wouldn't have any effect. Bone prison. Aurora only heard a cracking sound as a cage formed of bones firmly trapped her. Aurora raised her head and saw Ron standing in front of her with a bone spear in his hand. The sharp tip of the spear was pressed against her throat. The scene was dead silent. Everyone's mouth was wide open in disbelief. Aurora had actually been defeated. Ron's strength was once again proven. Aurora couldn't hold back her tears anymore. Ron jumped in fright. "What's wrong with you?" Ron panicked and removed the bone prison. The bone spear also dissipated in the air. He supported Aurora and said. Aurora suddenly threw herself at Ron and hugged him tightly. She burst into tears. Everyone was stunned by this scene. Among them, the fatty rolled his eyes and a faint smile appeared on his face. He immediately drove those people out. "Go! Go! Go, the fight is over. What's there to see? Disperse, disperse." Lantry, Karachi, and the others also understood and began to drive people out. The good show was over. Next was the internal affairs of Dorm 302. Of course, they couldn't watch. Those freshmen were deeply impressed by Ron's strength and dispersed in twos and threes. Ron thought that he had bullied Aurora and felt sorry. He apologized while patting her gently. After driving everyone away, the fatty came to Ron's side and said with a smirk, "Everyone is gone. How long are you going to hug?" Aurora blushed. She coldly snorted and pushed Ron away. She reached out to wipe the tears on her face and said, "You only know how to bully me." Ron sweated profusely. "You were the one who asked me to fight, okay? You said you wanted to see my true strength, and now you're saying this." He thought in his heart, but his mouth said something else. "Didn't I apologize to you?" "Sorry, Aurora stomped her foot and interrupted him. "Is an apology enough? You have to make it up to me." This. How do I make it up to you?" Ron sweated again. Aurora smiled mischievously. "I haven't thought about it yet. I'll tell you when I think about it." Okay," Ron replied foolishly. Okay. The fatty smiled and walked over. "We've fought and hugged. Shouldn't we go back to the dormitory? Don't let the other dormitories see us as a joke." The fatty was an expert at picking up girls. His eloquence and boldness made up for his lack of figure and strength. How could Aurora hide her thoughts from him? Aurora's face blushed to the tips of her ears. She cursed softly, "Damn fatty." It was late at night. In the girls' room of dormitory 302, Man and I was wearing sexy pajamas, revealing her full breasts. She was lying on Aurora's bed and gently pulled her arm. She smiled and whispered in her ear, "Why did you suddenly go crazy today and want to fight with him?" "Humph." Aurora turned around and said indignantly, "I was the boss of dormitory 302, okay? He came and took my position. It doesn't matter if I'm the boss or not. If I don't teach him a lesson, I won't be able to swallow it." Dorm 302 was originally a trash concentration camp. It was only after Aurora's arrival that things improved a little. Aurora also didn't want to be the boss. She braced herself and did it. Who told her to be the strongest? Looking at the other dorms, the bosses were usually knights, warriors, or magicians. How could there be an archer? Man and I chuckled. Then what do you think of his strength? He's very strong. Aurora pondered for a while and said, I believe that he didn't use all his strength today. Man and I said, aren't you the same? You didn't use all your strength today either. That's different. Aurora shook her head. The best way to understand a person's strength is to fight with him. Although we didn't use all our strength, I feel that he should be a little stronger than me. So it's like that. Man's eyes lit up. Then our dormitory 302's ranking tournament can guarantee us a spot in the top 50? Aurora pondered for a while. If his strength is a little stronger, top 30 shouldn't be a problem. Top 30? Man and I was shocked. There are many new people in the academy this year. Some of them are very strong. Every dormitory's strength has increased greatly. Top 30, isn't it a little too optimistic? It shouldn't be a problem, Aurora said. Man and I rolled her eyes and smiled naughtily. She changed her tone and said, Aurora, tell me the truth. Have you fallen in love with him? Aurora was embarrassed. No, I haven't. Man and I, don't talk nonsense. Nonsense? Everyone saw what happened today. Man and I smiled. You're still denying it. Your face has already betrayed you. Aurora only felt her face getting hotter and hotter. Man and I smiled naughtily. Let me touch. Have you moved your heart? As she spoke, she reached her hand into Aurora's pajamas. Man's hand had already touched her chest. Aurora cried out in shock, her face red as she said, Man and I, you're asking for it. The two of them started fooling around on the bed. For a moment, the girls' room in dormitory 302 was filled with a romantic scene. Chapter 119. With the fatty's help, Ron's Order of Skull quickly expanded. They now had about 100 members. Of course, this number was still a distance away from Hefels, Shea, and the others. Most importantly, there was a mix of good and bad in this group. Most of them were new trainees. During this time, Hefels had quieted down. It was unknown whether it was because his ambitions had been hindered by Ron's sniping, or because of the teacher's warning, but there hadn't been any large-scale provocations. However, small-scale conflicts were still common. At this moment, Ron was in the necromancy major's classroom. He was currently standing on the podium. Two people were sitting on the podium. One was his teacher, Vivian, and the other was Vivian's father, Jared. With Homeland's approval, Ron had decided to spread true necromancy magic. If he wanted to rebuild the Scourge Church, he would need a large number of necromancers. Standing on the podium and facing the two serious students, Ron felt very embarrassed. He was only 15 years old. If he hadn't taken advantage of ancient necromancy magic, he wouldn't have had the chance to give a lecture. Ron coughed and cleared his throat. Teacher Vivian, Teacher Jared, I will now begin to impart true necromancy magic to you. At this moment, Vivian smiled and said, Let's skip the word teacher. You're our teacher now and we're your students. Jared also smiled and said, Yes, Ron, let's skip the formalities. Ron stared blankly for a moment. All right, then I hope you won't casually ask questions during the learning process. If you encounter anything you don't understand, please note it down. I'll give you an answer after class. Ron was not putting on airs. In fact, this was what Homeland had taught him. In the process of teaching, it was strictly forbidden to ask questions. If there were any questions, they had to wait until he finished speaking. Ron then started his lesson. You're all learning modern necromancy magic. From Vivian's lessons, I've learned a little. Let's start from that. I'll talk about the differences between modern necromancy magic and ancient necromancy magic. The necromancy magic you're learning now comes from Master Khan. Master Khan devoted his entire life to studying necromancy magic, reviving it and spreading it. I admire him for that. However, necromancy magic is a broad and profound field of knowledge. Without systematic study, even if you have a complete book, you might not be able to learn it, not to mention that Master Khan only had a few fragments. To put it bluntly, the necromancy magic that Master Khan created is not necromancy magic at all. If I had to give it a name, it would be better to call it bone shifting. Of course, there are also innovations. For example, the bone combination spell, which ancient necromancers could not do. However, these are all fancy things that have no practical value. The necromancy magic that Master Khan created neglected the most important point, which is the power of the soul. A skeleton without soul power is just a skeleton of a walking corpse. This is also why necromancers are called trash. True necromancy magic is not that simple. Ron had a talent for lecturing. After the initial nervousness, the rest of the lesson became smooth. The two students listened very seriously. They were reading pornographic novels as they listened. They were writing something down in their notebooks. Jared was already old. His hair was white, but he still sat there like a primary school student. He listened carefully and took note. This was the first time they had heard the term power of the soul from Ron's lecture. In a small courtyard behind the necromancy classroom, the three of them sat together on the green grass. That's it. That's right. Focus your mind and gather your soul power, Ron said as he earnestly demonstrated. After a long time, Vivian and Jared were sweating profusely. However, they were still not in the right state. They couldn't even gather a trace of soul power. It's so hard. Only after learning did they realize that true necromancy magic was much more complicated than their so-called necromancy magic. It had already been an entire afternoon, but there was still no progress in learning soul power. Vivian couldn't help but feel discouraged. Take it slow, Ron comforted. He finally realized that learning necromancy magic was not an easy task. It was already very difficult for him to gather soul power in just one day. A long time passed. Forget it. Let's stop here for today, Ron thought. It was their first day learning necromancy magic, and they needed time to absorb it. There was no point in sitting like this. Perhaps it would be better if they calmed down on the second day. All right, Ron, we'll go back first. Vivian smiled at Ron and said. After the two left, Ron looked at the sky and muttered to himself, "It's still early, I'll cultivate a little longer." He quickly calmed down, closed his eyes, and quietly entered a state of cultivation. Traces of black gas seeped out from every pore of his body. They were like small streams that slowly flowed into the sea. The so-called sea was the small black ball that Ron held in one hand. The black ball was about 15 centimeters in diameter. It floated in the air and floated up and down, wantonly absorbing the soul power in Ron's body. The soul power continued to condense, and the black ball seemed to grow fatter. It grew bigger and bigger, and the soul power inside became more and more abundant. Homelin turned into a shadow at some point and stood in front of Ron. He smiled and nodded in satisfaction. Ron's strength is getting stronger and stronger. I'm afraid that he'll break through to Archmage Necromancer in less than 2 years. He'll be one step closer to his goal of rebuilding the Scourge Church. In Homelin's opinion, rebuilding the Scourge Church was not so simple. This meant that he had to fight against the Holy See. He had to at least reach the level of a powerhouse from the sacred domain. Suddenly, Ron's brows furrowed. The small black ball trembled slightly, and the tranquil energy suddenly fluctuated. Traces of soul power continuously spiraled and danced, faintly showing signs of instability. Homelin was shocked. Not good, Ron's soul power is in disorder. As expected, Ron's soul power began to go out of control. It crazily revolved around his body. His face alternated between red and white, and his body couldn't help but tremble. During cultivation, it was very rare for soul power to be in disorder, but it was also very dangerous. If one was careless and their soul power went out of control, even if they didn't die, they wouldn't be far from it. One could imagine what a person would be like without a soul. Just like a walking corpse. Not good. Ron also sensed that something was wrong. He desperately tried to control his soul power, but it was in vain. The berserk soul power continued to disperse, showing signs of devouring him. This is bad. Once his spiritual sense was devoured, the consequences would be unimaginable. Ron tightly shut his eyes. It wasn't that he didn't want to open them, but that he couldn't. His spiritual sense was gradually losing control. He tried his best to control his soul power, trying to calm it down. The situation is getting worse. This won't do. If this goes on, Ron will be close to death even if he doesn't die. Homelin immediately took measures, crazily pouring his soul power into the ball. This won't do. My soul power is being repelled. Homelin originally wanted to enter Ron's body and help him calm down the berserk soul power. Unfortunately, Ron didn't open his heart's defenses, and he was gradually losing himself. Homelin tried for a long time, but to no avail. Finally, he chose to give up. With a long sigh, he looked helplessly at Ron. There's no other way. He can only pray for himself now. After an unknown amount of time, Ron felt that he was in a daze. He opened his eyes. The sky was still overcast. Above the sky, waves of black smoke drifted, adding a hint of desolation to the sky. Ron crawled up with a grunt. Everything around him was so familiar, yet so strange. Where is this? Wasn't I on the back mountain of the necromancy major of the Balarax Academy? How did I get here? As soon as Ron stood up, he gave himself a good fright. He was actually standing on a mountain. This wasn't an ordinary mountain. This was a mountain made up of countless corpses. Although this mountain was small, it was made up of tens of thousands of corpses. Everywhere was a ghastly red. Severed arms, cut open stomachs, puddles of blood, and intestines hanging upside down. Ron's heart pounded. He suspected that he'd come to hell. Ron noticed that these people were wearing standard armor. Even though they were dead, those who had fallen to the ground were still tightly gripping their weapons. It was obvious that a bitter battle had just taken place here. Ron looked up. The small mountain he was standing on was only one of the mountains of corpses and a sea of blood. There were countless small mountains like this around him. What's going on? Have I returned to the battlefield in my dream? Ron was indescribably shocked. At this moment, the clouds and wind in the sky surged. Not far away, something seemed to be calling out to him. What's there? Ron subconsciously walked in that direction. His thoughts seemed to be out of his control. He walked step by step in that direction in a daze, as if the answer he'd been searching for was there. There's someone. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Ron finally saw a group of people in front of him. He immediately hid to the side, afraid of being discovered. However, those people didn't seem to see him at all. It was reasonable to say that at such a close distance, he should have been discovered long ago. In front of Ron was a group of heavily armored holy knights. These holy knights seemed to have experienced a fierce battle. Their armor was damaged in many places. In front of these holy knights stood a group of people in black robes. There were several dozen of them. These people in black robes were relatively clean, but their expressions were dispirited. It was obvious that they'd lost the ability to fight. Their eyes were filled with fear, and their bodies were trembling. The two groups seemed to be in a hostile state. The holy knights surrounded them. Chapter 120. The bearded commander sneered. I knew this bunch of people were stubborn. Even after using up all their strength, they still won't surrender. He laughed and made a cutting gesture. Yes. The soldier understood and immediately responded. Ready. The holy knights raised their swords up high, white holy light continuously condensing. The group of people in black also knew that their lives were about to come to an end. Their eyes shot out hatred as they raised their arms and shouted. As long as the undead don't die, the natural disasters won't be extinguished. As long as the undead don't die, the natural disasters won't be extinguished. The bearded commander clenched his teeth and said, Kill, no! Ron opened his eyes wide in fear. He had already seen the clothes of the mysterious group of people in black. They were necromancers. Bullets of holy light came one after another, and the necromancers who had already lost their ability to resist fell one after another. Not long after, there were no longer any survivors. It's over. The holy knights put away their weapons. The soldier walked forward. Sir, all of them have been purified. Very good. The bearded commander nodded in satisfaction. In the future, don't ask about those heretics. If you see them, kill them all, heretics. Ron heard this term and his eyes turned red. At the same time, he saw the eye-catching holy crosses on the holy knight. Divine. Holy. Church. Ron gritted his teeth and squeezed out these few words. Following that, his gaze gradually became distorted, and the scene in his eyes slowly became blurry. At this moment, the soul ring on Ron's hand strangely lit up. This trace of light was extremely dim, and even Homelin did not notice it. Strange. Why is the uncontrollable soul energy slowly condensing? Are things showing signs of turning for the better? That's impossible. Homelin was shocked to see that Ron's situation was slowly improving. The berserk soul power calmed down, and the chaotic black gas on Ron's body continued to move along its old path. Ron's breathing had calmed down, and after a long time, he slowly opened his eyes. A kind face entered Ron's eyes. Homelin looked at him quietly, his eyes full of concern. You're awake. Grandpa Homelin, what happened to me? Ron shook his head and asked. Only then did he realize that his clothes were soaked. Your soul power went out of control and almost collapsed. Homelin's grandfather didn't lie. But fortunately it was a close call. I dreamt of that war again. Ron recalled the scene in his dream and couldn't help but feel a little scared. The tragedy of that war was far beyond what he had imagined. Mountains of corpses and rivers of blood formed a ghastly scene. It's normal to have nightmares, but it's strange that you have the same dream every time. Homelin thought for a while. Maybe it's because you've been under too much pressure recently. Every day you've been training and studying, and you haven't paid attention to rest. Relax, even the Scourge Church wasn't built in a day. I understand, Grandpa Homelin, I'll pay attention. Ron nodded. Wait. Homelin was suddenly surprised. Ron, why did your soul power suddenly increase by so much? Ron was stunned. He quickly checked himself, and was pleasantly surprised to find that his soul power had increased by a large margin. At this time, his strength had exploded to the level of a rank 7 advanced soul master. What's going on? Ron didn't know what to do. He looked at Homelin for help. His strength had suddenly increased by such a large margin, it didn't make sense. I don't know, but I'm sure it's a good thing. Homelin smiled. Don't worry, Ron, your body didn't show any signs of trouble. Ron was relieved. That's good, that's good. Suddenly, his eyes focused. He felt something and stood up abruptly. Homelin asked, What's wrong, Ron? There seems to be something over there. Ron felt that something was calling him, and his body couldn't help but walk forward. There's something over there? Homelin was even more puzzled. What could be in that bush? How come I don't know? Then again, how did you know? Ron slowly walked into the bush and held his breath as he pushed aside the tall grass in front of him. What? Ron was stunned, and so was Homelin. What they saw was a corpse. This corpse was no stranger to them. It was the headless divine corpse that had escaped after being surrounded by the three powerhouses of the sacred domain in Balavax. The headless divine corpse was covered in wounds. Its body was covered in charred scars, and its blood was no longer flowing. However, the gaping wounds were still terrifying. Ron's eyes widened. Why is this corpse here? Homelin thought for a moment and said, maybe it ran here after being beaten up that night. Logically speaking, after being refined into a zombie, unless it's destroyed, it wouldn't run away without the master's command. This corpse is a pornographic novel. There are many mysteries about its body. So it's dead now. Ron boldly reached out and touched the headless divine corpse. There was no reaction. For a corpse that's already dead, there's no such thing as dead, unless its body is destroyed directly. Homelin glanced at the headless divine corpse and said, this zombie seems to have lost its mobility due to its severe injuries. As long as it's healed, it should still be usable. Heal? How? If it's healed, what if it attacks me again? Ron stuttered. You can use Death Coil to heal the undead. Homelin said calmly. As for whether it will attack you or not, it's hard to say. To be honest, with your strength, it's not enough to control it. Then forget it. Ron thought for a moment and decided to give up. This headless divine corpse was too powerful. It would be bad if it caused another major destruction. Besides, he was the one closest to this danger. Let's bury it here. Don't let it come out and harm others again. Homelin sighed and shook his head. The corpse of a god is so rare. It's a pity to give it up just like that. Then what should we do? Homelin pondered for a moment and said, corpse seal. Seal it. When you're strong enough to control it, you'll be able to use it. Ron thought for a moment and decided that it was fine. He would seal it and hide it. When he was strong enough to control it, he would take it out and use it. It would be a disaster if he just left it there. A beam of black light entered the headless divine corpse's head and gradually spread down its body. Soon, the headless divine corpse's body seemed to be covered with a layer of black spiderweb-like things that covered its entire body. This is the corpse seal. It restrains all of its power. This seal can even make the corpse fall into a deep sleep. All right. Ron raised his head, sweating profusely. Death Coil. A black ball of light jumped in Ron's palm. He threw it at the headless divine corpse without hesitation. Whoosh! A mist rose in front of his eyes. The black ball seemed to have been absorbed by the headless divine corpse. Like a stone thrown into a paste, small ripples appeared. The ripples spread. Soon, the wounds on the headless divine corpse began to grow rapidly. Soon, it was as good as new. After putting the headless divine corpse into the portal bag, Ron walked back to dorm 302 in the twilight. When he returned to the dorm, he saw Fatty and the others walking around anxiously. When they saw him, they said, "Ron, where have you been today? We've been looking for you all day." What? Ron was stunned. Something happened. Aurora walked up anxiously. Lantry was taken away by the Heifels. What? Lantry? Ron was shocked. He had just returned to the dorm when he heard such shocking news. Karachi cried and rushed up. "Brother Ron, please save my brother." Ron quickly calmed down. "What happened?" Fatty handed over an envelope. "This is a letter from the Heifels. Take a look." Ron quickly took it and opened it. There were not many words on it, only a simple sentence. "If you want your roommate back, come to Old Equipment Warehouse 107. After reading the letter, Ron pondered for a moment. With a questioning look in his eyes, he asked, "Old Equipment Warehouse 107? I know that." Manny took a deep breath and said, "Old Equipment Warehouse 107 is about 2 kilometers to the west of the Academy. It used to be the Academy's warehouse, but it has been abandoned. It has become the headquarters of the Heifels. I think Lantry should be locked up there," Manny said in the end. "In that case," he wants to challenge me, but… Ron frowned. Now that the Academy strictly forbids students from fighting, I don't know why he wants me to go there. Aurora said, strictly forbidding fighting has always been an empty sentence. Although so many things have happened in the Academy a few days ago, in fact, this rule has not been enforced very well. Ron thought for a moment and said seriously, You mean, they will besiege us like they did in the corridor last time? It's 100% possible, Aurora said with certainty. It can't be, right? Rum said, The dean came out of seclusion a few days ago and announced the decision to strictly forbid students from fighting. Would they dare to violate the law? Take the initiative to start a fight? It's hard to say for sure, Aurora said seriously. Ron sighed. No matter what, we have to go there, even if it's a dragon's lair or a tiger's den. His gaze gradually became firm. I want to go there too. Yes, Aurora said. Lantry is from our dormitory. No matter what, we have to save him. Wait. Fatty thought for a moment and said. He rolled his eyes and said with a sinister smile, We can call more people. Anyway, his letter of challenge did not say that we can't bring people. Yes, call as many people as you can to create a scene, Aurora said. Firstly, we can put pressure on Heifels. Secondly, we can attract the attention of the higher-ups of the Academy. Thirdly, we can help, yes? Ron nodded. Fatty walked around the dormitory. Soon, nearly 100 people had gathered downstairs. However, when they heard that they were going to deal with Heifels, they all felt uneasy. Some of them quietly retreated. In the end, there were only about 30 people left, which was only 1/3 of the original number. What a joke. Ron's Skull and Bones gang dared to provoke Heifels. He might be powerful, but others might not. Chapter 121. In the abandoned equipment warehouse of number 107, Lantry was tied up and hung upside down from a beam. He was covered in wounds and looked like he had been severely beaten. Lantry had returned to the dormitory after class and was asked by his sister to buy food in the cafeteria. Somehow, he bumped into Heifels. After his subordinate pointed out that this was Ron's roommate, Heifels brought him here. Lantry didn't know how long he had been beaten up. His face was covered in bruises, and his body was covered in scars. Many parts of his body seemed to have been burned by fire. His clothes had long been torn apart, and there wasn't a single piece of flesh left unscathed. The air in the old equipment warehouse was a little turbid. Light shone through the broken windows. There were more than 20 students sitting or lying down, looking lazy. There were more than 10 bottles of alcohol scattered on the ground, many of which were already empty. Firth High was drunk. He poured the last drop of alcohol from an empty bottle. Huh? That's it? She threw the bottle away in annoyance, and the bottle broke into pieces. What a bummer. I haven't had enough yet. Yeah. There's only so little alcohol. A senior beside him burped. Which damned guy went to buy alcohol? Why didn't he buy more? Pornographic novels. Look at him now, he's not even drinking. Fresno drank the least. He smiled and said, I've already asked someone to buy more. He'll be back soon. Firth High's gaze fell on Lantry. He smiled sinisterly. This guy, just looking at him pisses me off. As he said that, he suddenly rushed over and kicked Lantry's face. Ugh! Lantry was unable to dodge and let out a painful groan. F***ck me, aren't you a pervert? Isn't your Skull Society's boss, Ron, going to come and save you? Haha, I don't even see him now. Firth High laughed as he kicked Lantry. Tui! Lantry spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm. His blood-red eyes stared at Firth High. He gritted his teeth and said, Boss Ron will definitely come and save me. You still dare to be stubborn? High Firth grabbed a wine bottle and smashed it into 2 pieces, revealing a sharp edge. He said ferociously, Do you believe that I won't kill you right now? Even if Ron comes, he can only collect your corpse. Lantry sneered with bloody mouth corners. Kill me if you dare. Hey! Do you think I don't dare to kill you? The smell of alcohol rose up from Heifeld's head, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. He held the bottle in his hand and stabbed it towards Lantry's stomach. Enough. A voice came from the corner. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to wake Highforth up. Highforth put down the half-broken bottle and smiled embarrassedly. Yes, big brother. Although he was arrogant, he was still most afraid of his big brother, Heifels. Heifels glared at him fiercely. If you continue, he'll die. Do you want to kill someone? I just want to scare him. Highforth said with a smile. Heifels snorted. He was obviously dissatisfied with Lantry's answer, but he didn't say anything. Highforth rolled his eyes and said with a smile, Big brother, I'll get the priest to heal him and then play with him for a while. There's no wine to drink and nothing to do now. It's quite boring. Highforth was indeed full of evil tricks. He could even think of such a vicious way to torture someone. Heifels closed his eyes and didn't comment on his words. Highforth smiled sinisterly. This showed that his big brother agreed. At this moment, Frezino said with a smile, Big brother, you left him a challenge letter. Do you think Ron will come? Before Heifels could answer, the senior beside him answered, Nonsense, he has the guts to come? There aren't many people in the entire academy who would dare to accept Big Brother's challenge letter. As they were talking, the door was suddenly pushed open with a bang. A group of people rushed in. These people had a skull symbol wrapped around their arms. The sinister skull made them look a little creepy. Heifels. When enemies met, their eyes turned red. Although Heifels was sitting in a dark corner, Ron still recognized him at a glance. He called out his name with gritted teeth. Heifels flipped over and jumped up from the ground. He sneered, Ron, you didn't disappoint me. You really came. His younger brother, Highforth, darted out from the side and smiled. Not bad, you have guts, Ron. But I have to tell you, people with guts can easily lose their lives. With that, he smiled. Yo, you seem to have brought a lot of people. Do you think that you can win with more people? Heifels only had a dozen people, while Ron had close to 30 people. In terms of numbers, Ron's side had twice the number, but in terms of strength, they were far behind. Heifels's side had more than a dozen people below the intermediate level, but Ron's side had quite a number of trainees. Aurora snorted. Heifels, aren't you too arrogant? You even dared to touch someone from my dormitory? Hee, you must be Aurora, the one known as the Archer God. As expected, you don't look that good. Firth laughed. So what if that guy is from your dormitory? There's no one in this academy that my big brother doesn't dare to touch. You dash. Aurora was so angry that her face flushed red. Fatty sneered. Compared to a certain someone lying on the ground like a dog eating poop, I'm much better, right? When it came to bickering, Fatty would never be at a disadvantage. Firth hated it when others exposed his scars. He angrily said, Damn Fatty! I'll make you wish you were dead in a moment. Ron's face was calm. Heifels, your target is me, right? Now that I'm here, shouldn't you let him go first? Heifels smiled and tilted his head slightly. Let him go. Lantry was untied, and Ron's side immediately had someone take him. Brother! Karachi's heart was broken when she saw her brother being beaten like this. If she hadn't asked her brother to go to the cafeteria, her brother wouldn't have met Heifels, and wouldn't have ended up like this. Lantry was dragged to the side, and the treatment was handed over to Lantry. Ron took a deep breath, took a step forward, and said in a clear voice, Heifels, the dean has already said that students are strictly prohibited from fighting. What do you want? Heifels sneered. Strictly prohibited from fighting? That's just a saying. What do I want? Naturally, I want to solve the problem between you and me. With that, he waved his hand. At this time, the door behind Ron was pushed and slammed shut. The light suddenly weakened a lot. With their escape route cut off, the group of people brought by Ron couldn't help but become a little restless. Many of them braced themselves to come, and when they saw Heifels, they were a little frightened. Ron's heart was a little nervous. Heifels's strength gave him a lot of pressure, but he also knew very well that the more nervous he was, the more he couldn't show it on his face. If his heart was in a mess, then there was no need to fight. Ron smiled faintly. Here? No problem, Heifels. But I have to remind you that our fight won't end so easily. Heifels grinned. That's good. I just want to see your ability to fight against 100 people. Bring it on. Ron knew that if he didn't fight with Heifels today, it wouldn't end well. He turned around and cast a concerned look at Aurora and said in a low voice, I'll deal with Heifels. I'll leave the rest to you. Aurora nodded. Ron took a deep breath. Suddenly, he strode forward. He actually walked all the way to Heifels and confronted him. The distance between them was less than 20 centimeters. Heifels was a little surprised. His eyes narrowed. It's said that necromancers are all long-range fighters. Are you looking for death by walking so close? Ron smiled. I'm here to tell you that not only am I good at long-range combat, I'm also good at close combat. His space bag flashed, and Ron's azure bone staff suddenly appeared in his hand. His 10 fingers turned nimbly, and he actually stabbed the bone staff at Heifels like a dagger. Heifels was a knight, so his reaction wasn't slow. His hand shot out like lightning, and he grabbed Ron's hand. Heifels grinned maliciously. I'll take this hand of yours. As he spoke, he suddenly twisted his hand, wanting to break Ron's hand. Ron's close combat wasn't an exaggeration. After he created his own combat method, he constantly practiced and developed it. With his innate super-agile reaction, he might not be at a disadvantage even in close combat. His body turned around, and he easily avoided the broken hand. The bone spear hidden in his other hand suddenly shot out. Heifels was startled. He didn't think that his opponent would actually have a weapon hidden in his hand at such a close distance. He raised his hand and used his fighting aura. Boom! The bone spear hit Heifels, forcing him back a few steps. The hand holding Ron naturally loosened. Ron relied on his super-agile reaction and his familiarity with necromancy to turn a long-range fighter into a melee fighter. It had to be said that this was a pioneering feat, big brother. Firth turned pale with fright. He didn't think that his big brother would suffer a small loss in the first exchange with Ron. He was even more frightened of Ron's strength. I'm fine. This guy's strength isn't bad. Although Heifels was forced back, he still praised Ron, affirming his strength. Attack! On Ron's side, everyone saw that Ron had forced Heifels back in an instant. Their morale soared, and under the fatty's command, they took the initiative to attack. Those people suddenly charged over, and started fighting with Heifels's men. Fighting aura flew everywhere, magic rained down, and arrows flew everywhere. The scene was very lively. The fatty roared, holding 2 small daggers that didn't match in his chubby hands. He yelled as he charged into the crowd, wantonly slaughtering like a warrior. Manny frowned. Aurora, did you see that? Second fifth brother is going crazy again. Aurora naturally saw this scene as well, and she sighed. This fatty was weak, but the key was that he didn't listen to orders. He fought like an angry bull, and didn't even listen to Aurora's words. He was clearly a thief, but he actually charged at the front like a warrior. He was covered in wounds every time. If it weren't for his teammates looking after him, who knew how many times he would have died. It can't be helped. He's just like that. Aurora looked at the fatty's gaze rather helplessly. She said to Karachi, "Look after the fatty." Chapter 122. There was a large empty space between Heifels and Ron. The two of them faced each other in silence, completely unaffected by the chaos around them. Heifels took out a weapon from his dimensional bag. It was a spiked mace, dark gold in rank, completely different from Ron's azure weapon. Heifels laughed arrogantly. Ron, you're quite strong, but you're still far from my level. Today, I'll let you know how the word death is written. Ron was not to be outdone. He sneered. Very well. I hope your strength is as strong as your words. He crossed his arms, and the bone staff in his hand glowed with a faint green light. A black aura wrapped around his body, making him look as ferocious as a demon. Skeleton warriors! He tapped the bone staff in his hand like a professional conductor. Under his command, there was a slight commotion on the ground, and more than 20 skeleton warriors roared as they crawled out from the ground. Frezino was shocked. He immediately shouted, "Boss, these skeletons are not simple at all. You must not underestimate them." "I know." Heifels's dull voice sounded. "I did underestimate them before, but now, I won't. Come out, tiger with long fangs." Heifels roared. As he chanted an incantation, a mysterious summoning spell formation shone with a dazzling light from the ground. The ground looked as if it was about to split open, and soon, a huge black beast slowly appeared in Ron's line of sight. The black tiger with long fangs was over 2 meters tall. Its body was covered in black and gray stripes, and its 2 sharp fangs were particularly eye-catching. On its forehead was a striking king word that shone with a strong magical aura. One of its thick claws was as big as 2 of an ordinary person's legs, and its long tail was like a whip that swung freely. Aurora cried out in alarm. "Ron, be careful. Heifel's attacks are extremely powerful when he mounts." Ron's body trembled. He could feel Aurora's faint concern for him. At this time, Heifels was already riding on the back of the long-fanged tiger. His originally tall body seemed small compared to the long-fanged tiger. He sneered and clamped his legs. The long-fanged tiger roared and rushed towards Ron. Ron's heart trembled. Skeleton warriors, attack! Facing the 2-meter-tall tiger with long fangs, the skeleton warriors bravely pounced forward. They were warriors who had returned from hell, so they had no fear, nor did they know what fear was. Heifels's eyes flashed with an ominous glint. "You're courting death." He swung the mace in his hand and sent the skeleton hero flying into the air and crashing into the ground. Even though the skeleton hero's defense was strong, this attack was enough to break it apart. The long-fanged tiger pounced, its thick claws easily tearing through the skeleton warrior's defenses. With a crack, it tore one of the skeleton warriors in 2. The skeleton warrior turned into a cloud of black smoke and disappeared. The long-fanged tiger's entire body was covered in weapons. Its thick claws, sharp fangs, long tail, and with Heifels on its back, the skeleton warriors were no match for it. The long-fanged tiger was too strong. In the blink of an eye, nearly half of the skeleton warriors in front of Ron had fallen. A few of them had even disappeared. Damn it! Ron couldn't help but clench his fists after losing the first battle. Heifels was indeed too strong. After the initial nervousness, Heifels had a rough grasp of Ron's strength. He laughed without restraint. "Haha, Ron, I overestimated you. So this is all you've got. How disappointing." Ron wasn't discouraged at all. His eyes glowed with a faint green light. "How about this?" He tapped the bone staff in his hand, and another group of skeletons crawled up from the ground. "It's useless. These skeletons are pornographic novels. They're strong, but they're useless against me." Heifels raised the mace in his hand again. A powerful aura erupted as he smashed it into a skeleton warrior's head. The skeleton warrior's skull was crushed, and it howled in grief before disappearing into the air. The new skeletons were swaying as if they would be blown away by a gust of wind. Unlike the previous skeletons, these skeletons weren't wearing heavy armor. They only wore tattered magic robes and held short magic staffs in their hands. Skeleton mages. This time, Ron had summoned skeleton mages. Without chanting an incantation, the skeletal mages slowly raised the short bone magic staffs in their hands. Magic bullets began to condense in their hands. Fire, water, wind, lightning, earth, and all sorts of other elemental spells were cast. Hyphers was greatly startled by this. "Be careful, they're mages." Fresno had seen Ron's strength before, so he didn't rush to warn him even in the midst of battle. Mages? Heifels was shocked. The magic bullets in the skeleton's hands were already flying towards him. Earth battle armor. Seeing that he couldn't dodge the attack, Heifels released his earth combat aura. Streaks of earthy yellow gas rose from the ground and gathered around his body. Soon, the gas formed a wall around him and the tiger. Boom, 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 a large number of magic bullets fell, causing the earth battle armor to tremble. Earth battle armor was the strongest defense, but it was almost shattered by Ron's skeleton mages. Heifels gritted his teeth. He was bombarded by Ron's magic until he couldn't even raise his head. He could only bitterly hold on. "Damn it, I still underestimated you. These skeleton mages are actually so strong." Fatty rushed to the front, his dagger dancing like a watertight wall. Soon, he was beaten back by a swordsman, adding a few terrifying wounds to his body. "Rum, hurry up and heal second brother. He's dying," Karachi said, jumping up and down. As she spoke, she released small fireballs to repel the enemies around Fatty. I can't release it." At this time, Rum was sweating profusely from anxiety, but the more anxious he was, the more mistakes he made. He couldn't release the healing spell that he had practiced thousands of times. Every time he raised the scepter in his hand, he only released air. Karachi saw that Fatty's figure was on the verge of collapse and released a few small fireballs to cover him. At the same time, she stomped her feet anxiously. "Rum, can you hurry up? Second brother, he's really dying." I know." Rum didn't know why, but he raised the scepter in his hand again and chanted spells again and again, but he couldn't release any of his power, let alone heal. He was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. At this time, a freshman priest next to him made a move. A beam of light lit up on Fatty's body, and his wounds were quickly healed. Rum breathed a sigh of relief and said to the freshman priest, "Thank you." The freshman priest nodded. "You're welcome, senior. But your healing is also good. I don't have much magic left." "Ah, yes." Rum's face turned red from his junior's words, and he wanted to find a hole to hide in. As a priest, it was too embarrassing that he couldn't release healing spells. In fact, Rum could be considered an excellent priest, but his healing spells couldn't be revealed in critical moments. Sometimes, because of this, he dragged the whole dormitory down, so he was kicked out of his original dormitory and came to dormitory 302. Although Ron's group had a lot of people, except for Aurora, Manny, and a few stronger freshmen, most of them were trainees. Being able to follow Ron here was already a lot of courage. In terms of strength, they were pitifully weak, and many of them were beaten down by Heifels's group. Although Heifels's group had fewer people, they had the upper hand. Only Aurora and a few others were bitterly holding on. Manny was a fire intermediate swordsman. She wore a woman's light armor and wielded a one-handed sword like an agile snake. She held a shield in her other hand and dashed left and right in the crowd. Her strength was not bad, and her foundation was quite solid. Most of the professions below the advanced level were not her match. Compared to Manny, Aurora was abnormally strong. Her strength was far beyond that of ordinary advanced professions. She used all kinds of magic arrows, such as explosive arrows, guided arrows, multiple arrows, piercing arrows, and so on. Every time she shot an arrow, there would be an unlucky person who would fall. When she fought with Ron, she had held back her strength. Aurora's opponent was Heifels's wife, Mesoya. This advanced priest was very difficult to deal with. Even with Aurora's strength, she couldn't do anything to her. Aurora's weakness was that her defense was a little weak, but she complemented Manny well. They were called the best partners in dormitory 302. Basically, she and Manny represented the main force of Dormitory 302. "Oh, Boss Aurora, let me fight." Lantry had just recovered from Rum's treatment, and he couldn't wait to speak. Aurora said without turning her head, "Lantry, your body is still very weak. You'd better rest. I'll protect you, but... Lantry wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Aurora without hesitation. "No buts. Let's do it." What else could Lantry say? He shrugged his head and could only do as he was told. On the other side, the battle between Ron and Heifels had reached its climax. Ron had a bone spear in one hand and a bone shield in the other. He was riding a skeleton warrior, and under the cover of the skeleton magician, he attacked Heifels again and again with the help of the skeleton warrior. The two sides fought back and forth happily. Although Heifels was suppressed by the skeleton magician at a distance, close combat was his strength. Ron was also no match for him. If he didn't release the bone prison to restrain Heifels and make him unable to move, he would have been defeated long ago. At this time, Heifels had already put away the contempt he had for Ron. Those skeletons were not ordinary troublesome to deal with. Even with Heifels' super strong defense, he still suffered a lot. The tiger he was riding was also riddled with wounds. Although there were no fatal wounds, the small wounds on its body were as numerous as the hairs on a cow's head. Boom, boom, boom. Shouts, the sound of weapons clashing, the sound of magic bombardment, all kinds of noises rose and fell in the abandoned equipment warehouse of number 107. All kinds of lights shot out through the windows, and the ground was a mess. Ron and Heifels were in a killing frenzy. Both sides were almost out of their minds. Many people were already lying on the ground. Suddenly, the door of abandoned equipment warehouse number 107 was kicked open by someone, accompanied by a majestic voice. Chapter 123. F***CK, who are you? What right do you have to tell us to stop? Firth had just defeated a new student and was feeling smug when he suddenly heard a shout. He did not take it seriously and provoked. He thought that it was another faction from the academy that had come to help. With his big brother Heifels around, he did not put anyone in his eyes. Firth turned around and saw a familiar face. He was so scared that he almost fell to the ground. Duh! Vice Dean Dabbs? When the vice principal arrived, everyone stopped fighting. Even Ron and Heifels, who were in the midst of a fierce battle, stopped and glared at each other with their cross-eyed eyes. Dabbs walked over with a face full of anger. He had always been amiable in front of all the students. Ron and Heifels had never seen him lose his temper like this. Dabbs' face was gloomy as he said in a deep voice, "Who started this?" Heifels and Ron pointed at each other. Heifels was not stupid. He was smart. If he admitted it now, he would be courting death. The students got up one after another. Many of them who were lying on the ground let out inaudible groans and were helped up by their companions. Darbus naturally knew who was the instigator. As soon as he received the notice, he rushed over in a hurry. He glanced at Heifels and said, "Heifels, you're also a senior. A senior should act like one. How can you bully your own junior? What kind of scandal is that?" "Bully?" Heifels glared fiercely at Ron. Since the start of the fight, although the other party was at a disadvantage, it was not easy for him to win. How could the word bully come from? "Dean Dabbs, I won't dare to do it again." Heifels was tall and was a few heads taller than Dabbs. However, he was submissive in front of Dabbs. His arrogance and domineering aura from before had been thrown beyond the 9 heavens. Even the ferocious tiger with long fangs was as obedient as a cat. This was not just because of Dabbs' status as the vice dean. Most importantly, his strength was unfathomable. He was a water grand magus, a master-level powerhouse. It was said that he was half a step into the sacred domain. Otherwise, Prats would not have asked him to be his assistant. However, Dabbs himself was clear that he was still thousands of miles away from the sacred domain. At his level, it was not something that could be broken through with hard work. If he did not have the talent and opportunity, he would never be able to break through. Dabbs' expression eased a little. He was satisfied with Heffel's attitude. He nodded and said, "I'll let it go this time. If there is a next time, I will definitely expel you from the academy. Even if you want to settle something, it has to wait until after the ranking tournament." It was not that they could not fight, but at the very least they had to wait until after the ranking battles. Fights within the academy were common occurrences, and the mentors would usually turn a blind eye to them, acting as if they did not see anything. However, after Dabbs took over as the vice-headmaster, things became even worse. According to what he had said in a private meeting with the mentors, the students that they nurtured were not vases. Regardless of whether they were willing or not, they would eventually have to fight in various fields in the future. Perhaps it would be on the battlefield, perhaps in the forests where no one would tread, or perhaps in the manors of great nobles. In short, when he had chosen the path of the strong, in the end, if he chose to fight, he could not avoid fighting in his life. If he did not even dare to fight among students, what else was there to say? Therefore, the first thing that Dabbs did when he took over as the vice-dean was to privately encourage students to fight among themselves. As long as it did not harm lives and did not escalate the matter, the students who caused trouble would usually be lifted up high and let down gently. As for why Ron was locked up in the dungeon, it was because he had incurred public wrath. It had nothing to do with him fighting. "I understand," Hefels answered honestly. At this moment, Dabbs' eyes glanced at Ron from the corner of his eye. He said amiably, "Ron, if there's nothing else, you can go back. The injured students can be brought to the academy's treatment room to be treated by the teachers." "Thank you, Head Dabbs." Ron bowed. The skeleton warrior and skeleton magician behind him turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared. Not bad indeed. Summoning puppets to fight, and their battle strength is also incomparably strong. Looks like ancient necromancy magic is indeed worthy of its reputation, Dabbs thought as he twirled his beard. He smiled and said to Ron, "Oh right, Ron, go back and prepare for the ranking battle. Strive to obtain a ranking in the ranking battle. This is not only important to your dormitory, but also to you." Dabbs gave timely advice to Ron. Ron answered, "Yes, Head Dabbs. I will definitely prepare meticulously. I will not disappoint you." Dabbs nodded in satisfaction. He glanced around and left without looking back. He had finished speaking. It was up to them whether they listened or not. Dabbs believed that even if Hefels had 10 times the courage, he would not dare to make a move on Ron again. In fact, he was right. From then on, Dabbs did not look at anyone else. Dealing with the two leaders was enough. Dabbs left. He came alone without a teacher. After he left, the old equipment warehouse 107 regained its tranquility, as if he had never been there. Ron and Hefels looked at each other in silence. Their breathing was so light that it was almost inaudible, but it was very clear in this quiet warehouse. Ron clenched the bone staff in his hand tightly. He secretly became vigilant. If Hefels had made the first move, he would have retaliated no matter what. He was not used to being beaten, even if it was for Dabbs' sake. However, things did not develop as he expected. Hefels moved his mouth, as if he wanted to say something but did not. After a long time, he said, "Let's go." With that, he waved his hand and left with his people. "Just you wait." Highfirth walked to Ron's side and said fiercely, "Humph, who's afraid of who?" Aurora was not to be outdone. Phew! After Hefels left, Ron and the others breathed a sigh of relief. Many freshmen sat on the ground with a thump, their legs still trembling. They did not know how they had been able to hold on until now. Compared to their trainees' strength, Hefels was like a nightmare. Manny patted her chest and said with lingering fear, "This Hefels is really scary." My body almost froze when he looked at me. My heart is still scared. He's really strong. Ron thought for a while and said, I don't think I can beat him. How can that be? Karachi's eyes widened in surprise. I saw that you were fighting with him very well. You didn't seem to be injured. Ron smiled bitterly and did not answer. In fact, he knew that he was able to hold on until now mostly because of the soul ring, which provided him with almost unlimited soul power. If he took off the ring and used up all his soul power, he would be at the mercy of others. Let's go back first, Aurora said when she saw that Ron was not in the mood. Ron nodded and ordered everyone to help the injured students up one by one. The students' injuries were not serious. They were all light injuries, and there were almost no fatal injuries. He had brought a priest with him, so there was no need to go to the academy's treatment room. Big brother, why are you leaving like this? High Firth asked on the way back to the dormitory. Heifels snorted coldly. What can I do if I don't leave? Dean Dabbs has already spoken. Do you want to see me get expelled? High Firth was a little flustered. Big brother, that's not what I meant. I just don't like that Ron. Of course, High Firth was unhappy. He had thought that Ron was a good-for-nothing necromancer like the other necromancers, and that anyone could step on him. However, the reality had taken him by surprise. Not only was Ron not a good-for-nothing, he was also extremely strong. He was not inferior to his big brother in any way. In other words, the so-called genius that he was so proud of was not on the same level as Ron at all. This huge sense of loss had always accompanied him, and he had done one thing after another to target Ron. He knew that he was no match for Ron in terms of strength, so he had used instigating methods. First, he had provoked Frazino, then his big brother Heifels. Unfortunately, he had not been able to gain any advantage, and had instead become the leader of the Skull Association. Don't underestimate a small Skull Association. Ron had strength, and he was on par with Heifels. In time, the Skull Association's influence would grow, and their numbers would increase. These were all things that High Firth could foresee. Humph. I don't like him either, but what can we do? Heifels said indignantly. Isn't it because Dean Dabbs is protecting him? Heifels' wife, Missoya, thought for a moment. I don't think Dean Dabbs is protecting him. He just wants us to stop. From what he said, he doesn't allow us to find fault with him before the ranking tournament ends. Ranking tournament. At the mention of this, Heifels' eyes flashed. He gritted his teeth and said, In the ranking tournament, I'll definitely teach him a lesson, hee. Frazino chuckled. Ranking battles? Big brother, I think you're overestimating him. Everyone looked at Frazino. Frazino smiled. Ron's strength is indeed very strong, but the ranking tournament isn't about one person. It's about the cooperation of the 8 people in the dormitory. According to what I know, there are only 7 people in dormitory 302 where Ron is. 3 of them are advanced trainees, 1 intermediate trainee, and the other 3. Aurora's strength goes without saying, she's definitely an advanced trainee. Ron can also be considered an advanced trainee. The last one is a priest, and his strength should be considered an advanced one. However, you should have heard of this person, Ransom. He's known as the most useless priest in history. It's said that he has no problem casting healing spells normally, but he can't use them in battle. He's already been chased out by a few dormitories. Boss, do you think we'll have a chance to meet such a combination? I don't think he'll be able to enter the top 100. That makes sense. Heifels thought for a moment, and the corners of his mouth curved into a sinister smile. Then let's wait for the ranking tournament to end. Once it's over, I'll teach him a lesson. Chapter 124. This man was about 24 or 25 years old. He had sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. His blonde hair had a hint of nobility to it, and his unruly eyes emitted a cold chill. The corners of his mouth were slightly upturned, like a smile, but also like a little mischievous. He was dressed in white casual clothes. He wasn't tall, but he was extremely sturdy. Apart from the scar from his ear to the corner of his mouth that ruined his overall beauty, he could be considered a handsome man. The man had a student ID card of the Ballarak's Academy pinned on his chest. The old man guarding the gate glanced at him and waved his hand to let him in. I haven't been back for 2 months, but it seems like the Academy has changed a lot. The man muttered to himself as he walked. At this moment, he frowned slightly because he saw the building that was being renovated. Renovating? What's wrong? It seems like the Academy has gone through a lot of destruction. The man thought silently and fell into deep thought. Who would have the guts to wreak havoc in the Academy? The man had left the Academy for a long time. To him, the familiar Academy had an additional sense of strangeness. In the corner of a small pavilion, students were gathered in 2s and 3s. This pavilion was originally a place where students would study in the morning, but now it was shamelessly occupied by a group of students. This group of people was High Firth and his underlings. High Firth originally had classes today, but he skipped them. According to him, listening to the tutor talk about those elementary things was too boring. It's so boring early in the morning. Let's think of some good ideas to play with. High Firth stretched and said weakly. High Firth was half lying on the lap of a girl. That girl had a head of red hair that was very eye-catching. Her small hands were gently massaging High Firth's shoulders. Charlotte, Firth's classmate, was also in the same batch of special enrollment students. She was now his girlfriend. A freshman rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "There's a guy in the freshman paladin class who is very arrogant. He actually calls himself boss." High Firth, boss. How about we go teach him a lesson? I don't like him for a long time. No. High Firth shook his index finger in disdain. Ever since that incident with Ron, the Academy has strictly prohibited students from having direct conflicts with each other, at least not before the ranking battles. If you want to solve your problems, go by yourself. I won't go, oh. That freshman had an extremely disappointed look in his eyes. The guy he had mentioned was not easy to deal with. He had wanted to persuade High Firth to deal with him, but his strength was far from enough. At this moment, High Firth glanced at the path they came from and smiled. It's easy for you to find a paladin. There's one over there, ah? The new student turned around and saw the man from before. Even though he was wearing casual clothes, he was dressed like a holy knight. It was easy to recognize him. High Firth pointed with a smile. Isn't that a paladin? Call him over. I don't know him. That freshman shook his head. Stop talking nonsense. If I ask you to call him over, just call him over. High Firth jumped up and flicked him on the head. Yes. Boss High Firth. That freshman smiled and hurriedly stood up. He waved his hand. What's your name? Paladin, come over here, me. The scarred man in the distance frowned. In the past, those students couldn't wait to avoid him. This group of people actually dared to take the initiative to provoke him. What was going on? Interesting. They should be this year's batch of freshmen. The scarred man smiled. He walked over without batting an eyelid and asked indifferently, "What's the matter?" Highfield grinned. "Nothing much. I just wanted to ask you to come over." "Oh?" The scarred man frowned and smiled lightly. He wanted to see what this group of ruffians was up to. High Firth looked him up and down. "Looking at your appearance, your strength should be pretty good. At least the strength of an intermediate professional, right?" It was no wonder that High Firth spoke so arrogantly. He himself was at the peak of the intermediate professional and could break through at any time. Moreover, his brother had many advanced professionals under him. Even if the other party was an advanced professional, High Firth didn't put him in his eyes. "Looks like you just came back from somewhere? Hey, by the way, where did you come from?" High Firth asked with a smile. I just came back from the Holy Roman Empire. It was a little late to report. The scarred man answered honestly. Holy Roman Empire? That's right. I'm also from the Holy Roman Empire. Looks like you're a senior. How about this, you can follow me from now on. Haha. High Firth laughed, thinking that he was being generous. Ha. The group of freshmen looked at the scarred man as if they were watching a monkey show, their faces carrying traces of mockery. Ever since that day, Heifels was full of ambition. He formed the Black Tiger Gang and took in all the big and small forces in the academy. His strength grew. Other than Ron, who couldn't move because of Daba's warning, and Shea and the other big shots who couldn't move, Heifels wasn't afraid of anyone. Therefore, he naturally wasn't afraid of that lone holy knight. The scarred man smiled even more brilliantly, his eyes flashing with a trace of killing intent. High Firth's eyes swept over the space bag at the scarred man's waist, and a trace of greed appeared in his eyes. You just came from the Holy Roman Empire, so you should have brought a lot of good things. How about this, you contribute the things in your space bag? In the future, if you have any problems in the academy, this young master will take care of it for you. Saying this, High Firth reached out his hand towards the space bag at the scarred man's waist. The scarred man's eyes flashed with a trace of anger. Ouch! Before High Firth could reach out his hand, he saw the other party grab his hand like lightning. Then, a strong force came, and the bones in his hand felt as if they were about to break. You! High Firth was startled. The strength coming from the other party's warm hand made him afraid. He clenched his teeth, and with a boom, a powerful flame chi burst out from his body. How dare you? Stop it. You actually dare to touch the boss. The group of freshmen couldn't hold back and shouted one after another. Some even took out their weapons on the spot. You? Let go. High Firth felt that his hand was about to break. He struggled with all his might, but he couldn't escape from the other party's grasp. At this time, a trace of fear flashed in High Firth's eyes. The other party's strength could only be described as unfathomable. The man in front of him was too frightening. You. What do you want? Let go of him. High Firth's girlfriend, Charlotte, angrily said. Based on the other party's strength, she wisely chose not to make a move. The scarred man didn't release a trace of Do Chi. Just his own strength alone was enough to suppress High Firth's Do Chi. Facing the aggressive weapons of High Firth's lackeys, he didn't even blink his eyes and said to himself, I didn't expect that after leaving for so long, no one would recognize me when I come back. This is really ironic. You? Who are you? High Firth was startled and angry. He finally understood that the other party was definitely not an ordinary person. The scarred man smiled and didn't answer High Firth's question. Instead, he asked, You should be Heifels's younger brother, right? Or is it someone related to him? High Firth was completely stunned. He stuttered, You, how did you know? I guessed. The scarred man smiled and reached out to push him, letting him go. Tap, tap, tap. High Firth suddenly retreated a few steps and rubbed his painful wrist with lingering fear. The scarred man smiled. Tell Heifels that I will come to find him. Tell him to wash his neck and wait. After saying that, he no longer paid attention to the crowd and floated away. Those students were frightened of the scarred man's strength. They didn't even dare to take a breath, let alone rush up to challenge him. Once High Firth got away, the villain's face was exposed. He angrily shouted, Bastard, today's matter, I won't let it go like this. Paladin, if you have the guts, leave your name. The scarred man suddenly stood still and looked at those frightened freshmen. He smiled and said, My name is Mocklin. After saying that, he left without looking back. High Firth's mouth was wide open, enough to swallow a duck's egg. Mocklin, it was actually Mocklin, the Academy's #1 paladin Mocklin. High Firth had never seen him in person, but his name was like thunder to his ears. He had heard this name many times from his elder brother, and from Heffel's tone, he was also quite afraid of this person. It's actually Mocklin. He's Mocklin. Those freshmen's legs were trembling. The Academy ranking tournament's #1 pornographic novel. Dorm #1 and the Academy's #1 paladin. These two #1s created this legendary figure. Thinking back to how they had actually wanted to make a move against this person, those freshmen felt a wave of lingering fear. High Firth finally managed to stop his wildly beating heart with great difficulty. His mouth was incomparably bitter. "Quick, let's go back and tell elder brother that Ballarak's Academy's #1 paladin Mocklin has returned." Dabbs had just returned to his own personal office and brewed a cup of fragrant coffee. This coffee was produced in a place called Blue Mountain. Due to its low production, it was much more expensive than ordinary coffee. He held the cup in his hand and took a sip, then put it down and began his work for the day. Dabbs was the vice dean, so he didn't have much work to do every day, but he dealt with major matters. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment there was a knock on the door. "Someone's here so early?" Dabbs muttered in his heart, but he said, "Come in." The door opened and a figure that couldn't be considered tall and sturdy entered. "Why are you here so early? Have a seat? What's the matter?" Dabbs put down the quill in his hand and casually raised his head. He thought that some teacher was looking for him. Suddenly, his hand trembled, and his expression abruptly froze. This was because he saw a familiar figure. This figure had once been the Academy's pride. As the dorm #1 of the ranking tournament, the strongest paladin, Dabbs naturally wouldn't find him unfamiliar. Chapter 125. The person who had come was Mocklin, who lived in the same dormitory as Shea and Kadena. He was wearing the casual clothes of a holy knight, and just by standing there casually, he already had an aura of being as immovable as a mountain. The scar from his ear to the corner of his mouth was very out of place, but it added a hint of killing intent to him. The #1 paladin of the Ballarak's Academy, Mocklin, was the #1 paladin of the Ballarak's Academy. Compared to the ranking battles, the so-called #1 paladin focused on the overall strength, not his individual combat strength. But then again, when one's strength reached the level of Mocklin and Heffel's, the difference between them was extremely subtle. Search for the latest updates here. Mocklin, you're finally back. I thought you weren't coming back. Looking at Mocklin, Darbus was both surprised and delighted. He immediately walked out from behind his desk and held Mocklin's hand, reproaching him. "Where have you been all this time? You've only just returned after so long since school started." Darbus smiled as he sized him up. "Yo, your strength seems to have increased quite a bit. Not bad, not bad. Looks like this year's Academy ranking tournament's first place will belong to none other than your dormitory." Mocklin smiled very calmly. "My dormitory was lucky enough to obtain first place last year, but it wasn't all due to my efforts. As for this year's ranking tournament, there are as many experts as there are clouds. To be honest, I don't have much confidence." Darbus was naturally incomparably cordial towards the genius of Balrog's Academy. After all, Mocklin had won back much of the Academy's reputation. He warmly invited Mocklin to sit down and personally poured a cup of water. "You've just returned, so you haven't gone through the admission procedures yet. I'll get someone to do it for you. As for the school fees, we'll follow last year's rules and waive them all, and then the Academy will give you some subsidies. Then I'll have to trouble Headmaster Darbus," Mocklin said courteously. They chatted for a while more about the Academy, and both sides had a very congenial conversation. At this moment, Mocklin changed the topic. "By the way, Dean Dabbs, did a new student come to our Academy this year? His name is Ron." "Oh," Debussy replied softly. His expression was a little strange, wondering why he was mentioned. However, he did not intend to hide it from Mocklin. After all, he would know Mocklin sooner or later when he returned to the Academy. He nodded and said, There is such a person. What's wrong? Do you have a grudge with him? He thought that Ron was a troublesome person. First, he had a fight with Heifels, and now he had a grudge with Mocklin. Mocklin shook his head. No. He took a deep breath and hesitated for a moment before saying, Dean Dabbs, I have a presumptuous request. Speak. Dabbs chuckled. If you have any requests, feel free to state them. For an outstanding student like you, our academy should be more lenient with some conditions. As long as the academy can do it, Mocklin smiled. That's easy. Dean Dabbs, I hope you can hand Ron over to me. Hey. You can also say, hand him over to the Holy See. What? Dabbs was shocked. Hand Ron over to the Holy See? Yes. Mocklin's expression became serious. He looked at Dabbs calmly. Hand him over to the Holy See, Dean Dabbs. You can understand this as a deal. You can make any request here, as long as the Holy See has the ability to fulfill it. Mocklin was confident about this. He was very confident that he could convince Vice Dean Dabbs. Dabbs quickly recovered from his shock. He pondered for a moment and asked, Did the Holy See ask you to come? What benefits did they give you? Let you be a lobbyist? No. Mocklin smiled and waved his hand. Dean Dabbs, I don't want to hide it from you. The reason why I came back so late is because I joined the Holy See. What? Dabu took in a deep breath. His original intention was to keep this excellent academy as a teacher. As long as he could break through to the master level, he should be able to do so. However, he didn't expect him to join the Holy Church. Yes. Mocklin nodded calmly. He picked up his cup and took a sip of tea. Then he looked up and smiled. Dean Dabbs, not only did I join the Holy See, but I also became the Holy Son of the Vatican. Therefore, I can now speak on behalf of the Holy See. Regarding Ron, name your price. Mocklin waited for Dabbs to name his price. In his opinion, Ron was just a student and would not be of much use to the academy. As long as he gave enough benefits, the academy had no reason to not let him go. They would even cooperate to capture Ron. Unfortunately, he miscalculated. Dabbs' face immediately sank when he heard this. Mocklin, you joined the Holy See and became the Holy Son. This means that your future is limitless. It is not impossible for you to become the Pope one day. As your mentor, I should be happy for you, but, about Ron, forgive me for not being able to agree to your request. Mocklin's eyes widened. Before this, he had thought of all kinds of possibilities and proposed all kinds of outrageous conditions, but he did not expect Dabbs to refuse. He refused without any reason and even asked him to leave. Why? Ron was just a student. Why was Balarax shielding him? Mocklin's face was full of shock. He stood up. Dean Dabbs, please reconsider. There is no need to reconsider. Dabbs interrupted him and said indifferently, This is not only my idea, but also the dean's idea. Ron is a student of our academy. No matter what mistakes he has made, I cannot hand my student over to the Holy See. Mocklin, I can tell you very clearly now that there is no room for negotiation. There is no room for negotiation at all. Dabbs took a deep breath and looked at him quietly. Mocklin, you are the Holy Son of the Holy See and a student of the Academy. There is no point in talking about this anymore. If there is nothing else, please leave. Mocklin's eyes flashed with disappointment. He moved his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, he did not say anything. At this time, he bowed slightly. In that case, Dean Dabbs, I will take my leave first. Mocklin gently closed the door and walked down the stairs. Dabbs looked at Mocklin's back as he walked away, a thoughtful expression on his face. After a long time, he smiled bitterly. As expected, the Holy See still came. It seems that ancient necromancers are really attractive to them. Mocklin is back. This news spread like the wind throughout the academy. When Mocklin walked back to the dormitory, Many people who knew him were pointing at him, and everyone's faces were filled with obscene expressions. They showed a look of respect. The strong would be respected no matter where they went. A small independent apartment was the treatment given to the most outstanding students in the academy. Heffel's dormitory had one, and Mocklin was no exception. "You're back?" Mocklin pushed open the door to the dormitory, and Shea welcomed him. It seemed that she had already known about Mocklin's return. However, Shea felt very strange. Mocklin had been away for so long, but she did not feel much. Even her longing for him had lessened. She used to love Mocklin very much, and it could be said that she loved him to the core. She had confessed many times to him, but Mocklin was unmoved. The one he loved was Kadena. "It's you, Shea. It's been a long time." Mocklin smiled as a greeting. The scar on his face wriggled like an earthworm, and his smile was incomparably ferocious. "Where's Kadena?" Hearing him ask about Kadena, Shea frowned slightly, and the corner of her mouth twitched. "You only care about Kadena. You've forgotten about me." "How could that be?" Mocklin smiled gently. "During this period of time, I often miss you." "Liar!" Shea blushed. Although she knew that Mocklin was lying, she still felt a trace of joy in her heart. "Kadena just went out for a while. She should be back soon." "Oh!" Mocklin nodded, and a trace of passion appeared in his eyes. This scene was caught by Shea, and she felt ashamed and disappointed. "He still doesn't have me in his heart. Why should I keep waiting?" Shea thought in her heart. She was shocked by her own thoughts, and a person's appearance suddenly appeared in her mind. A figure that wasn't too tall, and even seemed a little thin, holding a short bone staff in his hand. That childish face revealed a trace of stubbornness. "Why would I think of him?" Shea's face blushed to the tips of her ears, and her heart was thumping nonstop. Mocklin didn't see Shea's expression and said casually, "Not bad, Shea, your strength has risen again. It seems that we should be able to maintain the first place in this year's ranking tournament." Shea didn't reply, and silently walked away. Mocklin shrugged and didn't comment. He walked to the window, and looked at the beautiful little garden below the apartment, and the corner of his mouth curled up slightly. "Ron, the purpose of my return this time is to bring you back to the Holy See's Mount Hygel to receive your trial. If it doesn't work, I'll kill you on the spot. No matter what, on the land of the Noah continent, an ancient necromancer must not appear. The ranking tournament will be the day of your death." A trace of a sinister smile appeared on Mocklin's face. After a busy day, the sky finally darkened. The students who had finished dinner returned to the dormitory in twos and threes, and they were free to do whatever they wanted. Some diligently read books and cultivated, while the lazy ones played cards, gambled, and played. There were even some who went to bed early. Dormitory 302 was brightly lit. Ron, Aurora, Manny, Gideon, Rum, Lantry, Karachi, and the others were gathered in the hall, discussing something. The Academy ranking tournament would be held in about 10 days, and the entire dormitory was shrouded in a battle-ready atmosphere. At this moment, Fatty Gideon stood up excitedly, and with a flick of his fat hand, something was thrown onto the table, making a crisp sound. Fatty gritted his teeth and said, "This is all I have, 50,000 gold coins. It's all here, and I'm donating it." Chapter 126. Aurora, Manny, and the rest looked at each other in surprise. How did the stingy Fatty suddenly become so generous? "Is this all you have? Who are you trying to fool?" Aurora didn't buy it at all. She definitely didn't believe that this was all of the Fatty's money. Even if the Fatty squandered money like dirt every day, he wouldn't be able to spend it all in 10 lifetimes. Every time he said he didn't have any money, but when he really needed money, he would always be able to take it out. Aurora understood that the Fatty wasn't poor, he was just famous for being stingy. The Fatty was ranked 7th in the family, with 6 sisters above him. He was the only successor of the family. How could the fatty not have money? Aurora didn't believe it at all. Ron's eyes fell on the table. He realized that the fatty didn't throw out a gold coin, but a card. The card was about the size of a palm, green and transparent, with tiny patterns on it. This is 50,000 gold coins? Ron couldn't help but ask. It was the first time he saw this thing. Once he said this, everyone's gaze swept over. They looked at Ron as if they were looking at a country bumpkin. The fatty exclaimed exaggeratedly, "No way? Ron, is this the first time you've seen this thing?" Ron nodded honestly. "Is this thing a gold coin? Or should I say, this card-like thing can be exchanged for 50,000 gold coins." "Heavens!" The fatty slapped his head and said bitterly, "I really don't know where you came from. You actually haven't even seen the symbol of status in the Noah continent, the crystal card." I really haven't seen it before." Ron couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed as he muttered softly. Aurora coughed. "Fatty, since Ron hasn't seen it before, why don't you explain it to him?" Fatty had no choice but to explain the origin of the crystal card to Ron. The crystal card was a tool used in the Noah continent to pay large sums of money. Crystals were refined from rare stones and could not be imitated or faked. One only needed to input a little bit of power to check the balance of the crystal card. During a transaction, one only needed to swipe the crystal card slightly and the gold coins would be transferred to the other party's crystal card. It was very convenient and practical. However, not everyone could apply for a crystal card. Only nobles and rich people could have one. The crystal card in Fatty's hand was of the bronze rank, which was also the easiest to obtain. The card's maximum limit was 100,000 gold coins. The next level was the silver rank, with a maximum limit of 1 million gold coins. Above that was the gold rank, with a limit of 10 million gold coins. At the very top was the diamond rank, with a limit of 100 million gold coins. Fatty spoke for a long time before Ron finally understood. Realization dawned on him and he asked, "Second fifth brother, how are you going to use the money? Are you stupid?" Fatty didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course it's for the brothers to buy and upgrade equipment. If everyone has good weapons, won't their combat power increase? When Lantry, Karachi, and the others heard this, their eyes lit up. They were surprised and happy. "Second fifth brother, are you really willing to spend money to upgrade our equipment?" "Of course." Fatty patted his chest loudly. "Anyway, I'm going all out. Didn't I tell you? We must get good results." "What if we don't get good results?" After a long time, Lonesome finally said. Fatty spread out his hand. "Then forget it. If we can't get good results, even if we try our best, it means that we're too weak. We'll continue to be the last. It's not like we haven't been the last before. But then, I won't have any money. I can only freeload from you guys in the future." Fatty showed his rascally side again. Aurora rolled her eyes at him. Fatty was loyal and stingy at the same time. She really didn't know how his two personalities were formed. Manny smiled and said, "That's great. Second fifth brother, you can lose some weight." Everyone in the dormitory laughed. Manny stopped laughing and asked, "Second fifth brother, how do you plan to use the 50,000 gold coins?" Fatty shook his head and looked at Ron and Aurora. "I really don't know. Let's listen to everyone's opinions. How about we split it evenly?" Aurora reached out and squeezed Fatty's crystal card in her hand. She pondered for a moment and asked, "In terms of equipment, what do you need to buy?" Manny raised her hand high and said loudly, "I want to upgrade my one-handed sword. It has to be upgraded to at least the gold level." Manny's sword was still at the sea blue level. Lonesome thought for a moment and raised his hand hesitantly. "I want to buy a necklace that can calm the mind. I hope my healing skills can be more normal." Karachi said timidly, I want to buy a better magic staff." "I don't know if it's possible," Lantry also said. "I want to buy a mount. But after thinking about it, I don't have much money." If it's possible, let's buy a better plate armor. Hearing everyone's requests, Aurora felt a headache coming on. The equipment that they were talking about, as long as it was of a higher level, would cost an exorbitant amount. Fatty's 50,000 gold coins wouldn't be enough at all. Wait. One by one. Aurora waved her hand vigorously, then turned to Fatty and said, "This money is yours. You go first. What do you want to buy?" Fatty chuckled and took out 2 short sky blue level daggers. He clapped them together and said, "I'll just use these. I won't be of much use in the competition anyway." Aurora nodded and turned to look at Ron. Ron scratched his head and said, thinking that he didn't need the money anyway. He said, I don't think I'll need it either. You can give it to them, how about that?" Aurora said with some dissatisfaction. "You're the main force this time. Your performance will affect our team's performance. Let's not talk about other things, but you should at least get a better weapon. I remember that your bone staff is of the sky blue level." "Yeah. Ron, we're counting on you this time. You're the main force. How can you do it if your weapon isn't good enough?" The others agreed. The strength of Dorm 302 was different now. There was no doubt that Ron was the first. In the eyes of others, it was only right that he took more. Moreover, he could only play a greater role in the actual battle if he was stronger. Ron didn't want this benefit, but the others disagreed. Aurora thought for a moment. "How about this? Let's not talk about buying anything. Let's just divide the money. Everyone will get a certain amount and then go buy what you need." The others thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Aurora smiled. "If no one has any objections, then so be it. Ron is the strongest, so let's split 20,000 gold coins. Manny and I will get 10,000 each, Rum will get 5,000, and the remaining 5,000 will be split between Lantry and Karachi and his sister." Everyone thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Aurora's division was fair and reasonable. The competition basically depended on Ron, Aurora, and Manny. Among them, Ron was the strongest. Although Rum's healing skills weren't normal, the priest still had to be taken care of. As for Lantry and Karachi, their expressions were a little sad, but they could only accept it. It was their fault that they weren't strong enough. Ron looked at them with pity. 2,500 gold coins wasn't enough to buy anything, but in this world where strength was everything, there was nothing he could do. "Right, are there any changes to the rules of this ranking competition?" Manny asked. Aurora shook her head. "There are no changes, but the rules are still the same." "What rules?" Ron asked. He still didn't know the rules of the ranking competition. "Let's take a look at this." Aurora took out a poster from her portal bag and spread it out on the table. Everyone gathered their heads together, and Ron's eyes also fell on the poster, only to see the words written on it. The Balarax Academy's 22nd Roland Cup ranking competition. Below was the date of the competition, signed by Principal Platts. According to the arrangement of the ranking competition, more than 4,000 people from the Balarax Academy's 500 dormitories would form teams to participate in the competition. The competition would be divided into 4 regions, with each region having an average of more than 100 teams. The first round would be the preliminaries, and the second round would be a one-off elimination system. The losers would be eliminated, and they wouldn't be able to participate in the next round. At the end of the preliminaries, 16 teams from each division would advance, and the 64 teams from the 4 divisions would draw lots for one-on-one matches. The winners would advance, while the losers would be eliminated. The 32 teams would enter the finals, and then the remaining 16 teams would enter the quarterfinals. The remaining 8 teams would enter the quarterfinals, and after the quarterfinals, they would enter the semifinals to determine the final 4 teams. Among the 4 teams, the 2 winning teams would compete for the championship and the runner-up of the Roland Cup, while the 2 losing teams would compete for the 3rd place. Ron sat on the sofa, resting his chin on his hand. "If that's the case, you can't lose to become the champion. Losing once is not enough. That's true. Aurora nodded. At this time, she bitterly smiled and said, but for a team like ours, we can forget about becoming the champion. Our original goal was to rank within the top 100. Ron said, that means we have to at least rank 64. 64? We only need to rank 64 to qualify. Aurora clenched her fist. Dormitory 302 was congenitally deficient. The other dormitories had full combat teams, but they only had 7 people. 3 of them were noobs who couldn't be of any use, and the only cleric had a nervous disorder. Her healing spells were sometimes ineffective, and the only ones who could really fight were Aurora, Ron, and Manny. This was an impossible task for them. Fatty smiled. Isn't Ron able to fight against 100 people? If that's the case, won't it be easy for us to win the championship? That's impossible. Ron shook his head and said, that day I was dealing with a motley crew. They had all kinds of strengths, and it was impossible for them to form an effective cooperation. But it's different if we meet a team of experts who have a tacit understanding. Besides, there's no lack of experts in the other dormitories. If we meet someone like Hefels, it's already not bad if I can hold him off one-on-one. Chapter 127. Ron sat cross-legged on a large bluestone at the back of the necromancy classroom. He focused his mind and entered a state of cultivation. Under the scorching sun, the earth seemed to be roasted. However, Ron's body was surrounded by a Een aura. It was a cool and refreshing world that was incompatible with the current weather. After a long time, Ron finally opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of turbid air. The black soul energy that surrounded his body had already completely disappeared. Search for the latest updates here. Slowly putting down the pornographic novel Ron sighed. I can't actually enter that dreamscape. Whoosh! Homelin's shadow appeared beside Ron and asked, how is it, can you enter that dreamscape? Ron shook his head. He couldn't enter that mysterious dreamscape no matter what. Ever since he entered that dreamscape that day, Ron discovered that his soul energy had greatly increased. Homelin also sensitively discovered this shortcut and encouraged him to find a way to enter that dreamscape. Unfortunately, fate seemed to be playing a joke on Ron. When he deliberately pursued it, he couldn't enter it. Homelin sighed in his heart. Ever since Ron entered that dreamscape last time, he had directly soared from the 5th level to the 7th level. According to Homelin's estimation, if he had a few more dreamscapes like this, it wouldn't be a big problem for him to enter the master level in advance. He wouldn't even need 2 years, perhaps 1 year would be enough. Homelin took a deep breath. Forget it, some things can only be encountered but not sought. Let nature take its course. When Ron returned to room 302, he discovered that everyone was there. However, what made him feel strange was that they were all fuming and had an unhappy look on their faces. Fatty stood up angrily. That group of bastards is looking down on us. Damn it, I'll call someone to deal with them right now. Aurora's face was ashen. Fatty, sit down. Fighting won't solve the problem. Fatty sat down angrily. Ron was surprised. What's wrong? What happened this time? Ron's first reaction was that someone was being bullied again. No. Aurora waved her hand, looking at Ron with her beautiful eyes. This morning, I went to look for a famous enchanter in the academy to enchant Manny's one-handed sword. I even prepared the exotic beast essence core. Who would have thought that the enchanter would actually side with Hefels? Not only did he refuse to help when we went to him for the enchantment, he even ridiculed us. Don't you think this is infuriating? Yes. Man and I also said angrily. My relationship with him is still considered good. I didn't expect him to become like this after relying on someone else. Karachi leaned over obediently and squeezed Manny's shoulder. Forget it, Sister Manny. It's not worth getting angry over such a person. At this time, Lantry asked worriedly, what should we do now? Manny sighed. What else can we do? Let's go find an enchanter outside, but those enchanters are very expensive, and their skills aren't all that great. There are many who just make up the numbers. Although that guy is a little conceited, he comes from a family of enchanters. His father, grandfather, and a few others are all famous enchanters. His enchanting skills are really not bad. Ron understood. It turned out that Aurora and the others had gone to look for their seniors to enchant Manny's sword early in the morning. Who would have thought that Heifels would pull that guy under his wing first? Not only did they fail to enchant the sword, they were also ridiculed. Fatty said indignantly, "Why don't we do it ourselves? It's better than letting others take advantage of us. We don't even have to spend money." Manny rolled her eyes at Fatty. "You make it sound so easy. Do it ourselves? Even if I gave you 30 beast essence cores, you might not be able to enchant it successfully." In order to upgrade her aquamarine grade weapon to gold grade, Manny could be said to have put in a lot of effort. She persuaded Aurora to lend her 10,000 gold coins and bought a total of 20 level 4 beast cores. Each core cost 1,000 gold coins, and she swore that she would successfully enchant them. Unfortunately, all her hopes were dashed by Heifels. "Forget it." Aurora stood up and said, "Let's go find an enchanter outside the academy to help. I know a weapon shop that has pretty good enchanters. All right?" Manny nodded in agreement. Everyone stood up and was about to leave when a timid voice came from the corner. "Ugh, why don't I give it a try?" "What?" Everyone turned around in shock and looked at Ron, who was speaking. Ron mustered up his courage. "I said, instead of spending a lot of money to hire an enchanter outside, why don't you let me give it a try?" Manny was surprised and delighted. "Ron, you're saying you know how to enchant?" Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. Ron hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I know a little, but as for the technique, I don't know." "That's great." Manny cheered and jumped over, kissing Ron hard on the cheek. "Then I'll leave my one-handed sword to you." Ron's face flushed red from Manny's open-mindedness. He stood there, not knowing what to do, and stammered, I don't know if it'll work." Manny smiled. "In any case, I trust you." Ron raised his head in shock, looking at everyone's expressions of deep agreement. It turned out that he had unknowingly won the trust of his roommates, and this trust had become deeply rooted. Even if he had never enchanted anything before, the words he said could create an unshakable trust in others. Ron nodded heavily. "Leave it to me, I'll do my best." Seeing Manny kiss Ron, Aurora was a little jealous. She glared fiercely at Manny, who stuck out her tongue playfully, knowing that Aurora was jealous. Aurora said, "Ron, since everyone trusts you so much, you should give it a try." She handed the space bag to Ron as she spoke. "There are 20 exotic beast essence cores we just bought inside. This is all the money Manny and I have budgeted. You must succeed." "All right." Ron nodded and reached out to take it, feeling the heavy responsibility. He thought for a moment, then suddenly said, "However, I think I still need some exotic beast essence blood. The higher the grade, the better." "Exotic beast essence blood?" Aurora was confused. "What do you need exotic beast essence blood for? You're not a pharmacist." She thought for a moment, then said, "Compared to exotic beast essence cores, exotic beast essence blood isn't very expensive, but Manny's budget has already been used up." Before Aurora could finish, Manny interrupted. "Ron, go ahead and do it. I'll pay for the exotic beast essence blood myself." Ron returned to his room and closed the door. In order to prevent anyone from disturbing him during the enchantment process, he isolated everyone outside. It had to be known that the enchantment of a weapon was a very taxing task. Not even the slightest mistake was allowed. Ron was sitting on a chair. In front of him were 30 bottles of blood essence from level 6 exotic beasts, 20 level 4 exotic beasts cores, a large pile of materials, and a shining one-handed sword. The blade of the sword was glowing, emitting an azure light. Homeland's figure darted out of the ring, looking at Ron and asking in surprise, "Ron, are you going to enchant it?" Ron nodded, "Yes, Grandpa Homeland. I'm preparing to upgrade Manny's sword." Homeland smiled, "Not bad. A good enchantment master is the guarantee of a team's victory. Ron, do your best." Ron gently stroked Manny's aquamarine fury, one-handed sword and nodded heavily, "I will definitely succeed. First, I have to make an enchantment card." Ron thought to himself. The 30 bottles of exotic beast essence Blood Manny had brought were worth 2,400 gold coins. She had already used up all her money. He used a quill pen to continuously write and draw on a 1-inch square card, and not long after, an enchanted card was successfully made. The enchantment card creation went smoothly. Ron made 3 cards in one go without any mistake. Looking at the tightly shut door, Karachi asked a little nervously, "Aurora, do you think Ron will succeed in the enchantment?" Aurora revealed a thoughtful expression, "He should be able to. That fellow never does anything he's not confident in. Moreover, he has never disappointed us before." Manny smiled. "I don't know why, but I have so much confidence in him. I feel that, even the enchantment master in that academy didn't give me that much confidence." "It's done." Ron held the 3 enchantment cards in his hands, extremely excited. His eyes fell on the aquamarine fury, one-handed sword, and he took a deep breath. "Now, I'll start the enchantment." Holding the aquamarine fury, one-handed sword in one hand and the exotic beast essence core in the other, Ron slowly entered the zone. The enchantment process had to be done with extreme caution. Not a single mistake could be made. Traces of power were drawn out by Ron from the essence core. Like gas, they were absorbed onto the surface of the weapon, covering the entire one-handed sword in a layer of color. This was how the word "attach" came about. Ron slowly waved his arm. The gas became thicker and thicker, and more power was absorbed. Finally, the white light circulating on the aquamarine fury sword began to change color. It went from light to dark, and the color became golden. At this moment, the aquamarine fury, one-handed sword began to emit a dazzling golden light. The golden light illuminated the entire room, and the energy of the exotic beast essence core in Ron's other hand had been completely sucked out. The entire essence core turned into vegetarian powder and disappeared, falling to the ground like sand. Ron's forehead was sweating. The aquamarine fury, one-handed sword in his hand, gently floated up. The enchantment was also at its final stage. "It's time to add the enchantment card." Ron's mind moved. His other hand quickly grabbed the enchantment card. Under the control of his power, the entire card turned into a ball of fire and scattered towards the aquamarine fury, one-handed sword. As if a chemical reaction had occurred, the light on the weapon suddenly became brighter. The golden light almost made Ron unable to open his eyes, and the whole room seemed to be covered in a layer of gold. Finally, the chaotic energy stopped, and the flowing golden light calmed down. "It's done." Ron was overjoyed. He saw the one-handed sword slowly absorbing the golden energy, and it gradually became restrained. Aquamarine Fury one-handed sword. Success. The aquamarine weapon was upgraded to gold rank. He actually succeeded in one try, and only used one exotic beast essence core. Ron's heart almost jumped out of his chest. The ecstasy he felt was indescribable. "Grandpa Homelin, I did it!" Chapter 128. In the hall of room 302, everyone was waiting anxiously. Ron had been in there for more than an hour, but he still hadn't come out. Everyone's hopeful expressions gradually turned to disappointment. Aurora sighed. "Looks like it's most likely a failure. How can enchantment take so long?" Just then, Ron's door opened with a creak. "How was it? Did it work?" Aurora and the others rushed over with questioning expressions. Manny didn't go over. She sat where she was, but her eyes were filled with hope. Ron's face was tense at first, making everyone's hearts jump to their throat. Suddenly, he laughed. It worked! What? It actually worked? Everyone's eyes suddenly widened. The entire room 302 became silent, and even the sound of breathing became heavy. Ron smiled as he walked over. He took out the shining golden fury one-handed sword from his portal bag and handed it to Manny with both hands. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. When Manny received the shining golden fury one-handed sword in a daze, she still hadn't come back to her senses. Congratulations, Manny. Aurora smiled as she gave her blessings. Haha, not bad, Manny. You can finally use gold-grade equipment, Fatty said with a smile. Although this matter had nothing to do with him, he was still sincerely happy for Manny. Suddenly, Manny covered her face. Tears flowed through the gaps between her fingers. Ron was dumbfounded. He looked at Aurora strangely and thought to himself, shouldn't the enchantment be a happy thing if it was successful? Why was Manny crying instead? Only Aurora understood that Manny had been waiting for this day for too long. She had put in a lot of effort for this day. Manny was born into an ordinary family. She had become a mid-grade swordsman through her own efforts and talent. On one hand, she had to pay school fees to upgrade her weapon and buy equipment and potions. On the other hand, she had to earn money to support her family. When others showed off gold or even dark gold weapons in front of her, she was envious and jealous. However, they were all nobles. No matter how bad their family situation was, they were still quite good. For an ordinary family like Manny to be able to use a sky blue weapon was already good enough. However, Manny wasn't convinced. She used her holidays to join a mercenary group and hunt exotic beasts, all for the sake of turning her weapon into a gold-quality weapon. However, in the process of hunting exotic beasts, she needed money to buy equipment, medicine, and so on. In the end, she could only scrimp and save, saving coin by coin. However, she was still far from her dream of having a gold-quality weapon. There were many rich people in Balrafax Academy, but there were even more people from ordinary families. They couldn't even afford a sky-blue weapon, let alone a gold one. For Manny to be able to upgrade her weapon to sky blue was already very impressive. However, on this day, her dream had finally come true. How could Manny not be excited? Aurora patted Manny's back and comforted her softly. At the same time, she glanced at Ron and said apologetically, "Sorry, Manny is too excited." She sighed softly. "Manny has been waiting for this day for too long. I remember that the first time she failed to level up, she didn't have a single gold coin on her. I even had to pay for her meals. Then, last year, she finally managed to save some money with great difficulty. Unfortunately, she failed again, and once again, she had nothing. After that, she was tricked again. Someone tricked her into giving her a gold weapon, but..." Aurora pursed her lips and didn't want to continue. Fatty and Lantry sighed softly, their gazes filled with sympathy. Rum was a little confused. If that's the case, the money Manny spent on upgrading her weapon is already more than buying a gold weapon. Why didn't she just buy it? "That's easy for you to say." Aurora rolled her eyes at him. "Anyone can give advice in hindsight, but who would have thought that the enchantment would fail? If it had succeeded, wouldn't she have saved a lot of money?" Karachi chimed in, "Besides, a gold weapon isn't cheap. If everyone could afford it, who would spend money to upgrade it?" Rum didn't say anything. His family was much better off than Manny's, so he wouldn't encounter this problem. "Thank you, Ron." Manny stood up and thanked Ron sincerely. "It's nothing." Ron smiled. "We're all friends. Why are you being so polite?" Aurora asked, "Right? You used quite a lot of exotic beast essence cores for the enchantment this time, right? There are still a few left. See if you can help others upgrade their weapons." "A few?" Ron smiled. Aurora was a little anxious now. She stomped her feet and said, "Where are the 20 exotic beast essence cores?" You didn't use them all, did you? There should be at least 2 or 3, right? AI, since you've used them all, so be it. Aurora wanted to blame Ron, but when she saw Manny's pitiful gaze, her heart softened. 1. Ron smiled and stretched out his finger. I only used one, and it succeeded on the first try. What? No one dared to believe their own ears. Upgrading a navy blue weapon to gold tier only required a single exotic beast essence core? Even an enchantment master couldn't do it so easily, right? When Ron placed the remaining 19 exotic beast essence cores in front of them, they were truly convinced. They even looked at Ron with reverence in their eyes. Fatty patted Ron's shoulder heavily. Ron grimaced in pain. Damn, you're good. I really couldn't tell that you had the talent to become an enchantment master. No, even an enchantment master might not be as good as you. Lantry was happy as well. I didn't expect an enchantment master to appear in our dorm. This is great. We don't have to beg others to upgrade our weapons anymore, Aurora asked. How did you do it? Ron smiled and took out something from his spatial bag, waving it in front of everyone. What? Aurora exclaimed. An enchantment card? You actually have an enchantment card? This thing isn't cheap. Yeah. Fatty said, this enchantment card can increase the success rate. It's said that it can turn someone who doesn't know how to enchant into a real enchantment master. Although it's a little exaggerated, it's also true that this thing is called an enchantment master's treasure. Ron was shocked. Are you kidding me? Is this thing very expensive? Of course. Fatty nodded heavily. An enchantment card is worth at least 10,000 gold coins, and it might not even be available. If it's auctioned, the price will be even higher. 10,000? Ron was completely dumbfounded. The exotic beast essence blood he bought with a few hundred gold coins was only worth 10,000? This was daylight robbery. Then, don't those enchantment masters use enchantment cards to enchant? Ron asked, stuttering. He originally thought that the enchantment card was something very ordinary, but now he realized that wasn't the case at all. Enchantment with enchantment cards? Fatty's eyes widened. Heavens, is there such a luxurious enchantment master in this world? You're the only one I've seen so far. This thing is used when making high-grade weapons. Ron, it's too wasteful for you to use it on low-grade weapons like mine. Manny said bitterly. Yeah. Aurora said, most enchantment masters directly enchant. Unless it's for dark gold or high-grade weapons, no one would use this. The value of an enchantment card is far higher than an exotic beast essence core. Yeah, it's such a pity. Ron smiled. There's nothing to pity as long as everyone is happy. Manny looked at Ron with gratitude. Aurora thought for a moment, then said happily, Ron, since you know how to enchant, why don't you help us upgrade all our weapons? It'll be at least gold grade. Sure. Ron smiled and nodded. He turned to Manny and blinked, saying, but before that, I plan to upgrade Manny's sword to dark gold grade. Dark gold grade? Manny was surprised and happy. Her voice started to tremble. A dark gold grade weapon had always been her dream, but when it really came to her, it seemed so real. If you can really give me a dark gold grade weapon, I'll do anything you want. Manny's eyes glistened with tears. Aurora tugged at her and said reproachfully, Are you having a fever? What nonsense are you talking about? Everyone laughed loudly, and Ron felt extremely awkward. That's it. Go buy some exotic beast essence blood. I still have use for it, Ron said, smiling. With his first experience, Ron was much more proficient in controlling the energy within the exotic beast essence cores. Soon, after failing twice, he successfully upgraded Manny's sword to dark gold grade. Dark Gold Fury Single-Handed Sword. Ron looked at his masterpiece and couldn't help but laugh. It was his first time creating a dark gold grade weapon, and he felt a great sense of accomplishment. At this moment, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Being an enchanter was still the best. A dark gold-grade weapon was at least a pornographic novel. It was sold for 20 to 30,000 gold, but the cost was only a few thousand gold. Although he had the help of the enchanter card, other enchanters would make at least half of the profit without the card. And this was only the lowest grade weapon. If it was a high-grade weapon, the risk would be even higher, and the price would definitely skyrocket. Looking at the remaining dozen or so exotic beast essence cores, Ron chuckled mischievously. If he replaced everyone's weapons with dark gold weapons, the students would be so shocked that their eyeballs would fall out of their sockets. Ron couldn't help but fantasize in his heart. In just a few days, Ron had completed everyone's dark gold-grade weapons. Among them, Lantry and Karachi's weapons were redesigned by Ron. When Karachi and Lantry received their dark gold-grade weapons, they were pleasantly surprised. They never dreamed that they could own a dark gold-grade weapon. With their strength and ability, they probably couldn't afford one in their lifetime. Bang! 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 Several signal flares flew into the sky, and beautiful fireworks bloomed. The entire Ballarak's academy was like a festival, a scene of joy. The 22nd Roland Cup ranking tournament had begun. Ron, it's time to gather. Are you ready? Ron turned his head and saw Aurora, who was dressed in light armor and full military uniform, standing in front of him. Chapter 129. The entire Roland Cup was divided into 4 regions, and Ron's room 302 was assigned to the 4th region. When Ron and Aurora arrived at the arena, they realized that Fatty and his group had already arrived. The large square was filled with people who were either participating in the competition or waiting for the competition. Most of them were asking for information, and they still didn't know who their opponents were. "Hey, you guys are here, over here!" Fatty waved and shouted. Ron smiled and walked over. "Hey, 2nd, 5th brother, you're early. Of course, we're not the main force, we're just here to ask for information. This is the only thing I can do." Fatty smiled. Aurora smiled. "How is it, did you find out anything?" Fatty nodded. "I found out a bit, we're in the 4th region, everyone knows this. Hefels's team is in the 1st cold region, and Machlin's team is in the 3rd region. Hee, at least we won't have a chance to meet them before we qualify." "That's better." Aurora sighed in relief. Ron smiled. "Only 16 teams qualify in each region, we don't have to fight for first place, we just have to qualify." Everyone laughed. Aurora thought for a moment. "Oh right, did the Academy say if there's any reward for winning the Roland Cup?" "Of course there is, how could there not be?" Fatty smiled and said, "The Academy is really generous this time, every team that qualifies will be rewarded with 10,000 gold coins." 10,000 gold coins for qualifying? Aurora covered her mouth exaggeratedly. "There are a total of 64 teams in the 4 regions, wouldn't that be 640,000? There was no reward for qualifying in the past." Manny smiled. "So what if it's 640,000? The Academy has the Roland Empire's special funding, a few million gold coins isn't a problem. The next part is amazing. Above that, the teams that enter the 32nd place will have to pay 20,000 gold coins per team. The teams that enter the 16th place will have to pay 40,000 gold coins per team. The top 8 teams will have to pay 80,000 gold coins per team. The top 4 teams will have to pay 160,000 gold coins. As for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place teams, this is quite abnormal. Fatty purposely kept everyone in suspense. When he saw that everyone was listening attentively, he said proudly, "1st, 2nd, and 3rd place, each team will receive 320,000 gold coins and a dark gold weapon. The champion's weapon is of high quality, the runner-up's weapon is of medium quality, and the 3rd place's weapon is of low quality. Note that everyone gets one." Everyone took one. Everyone took a deep breath. What was a big deal? This was a real big deal. It seemed that the Academy had indeed spent a lot to prepare this Roland Cup. Aurora sighed. The prizes are indeed much more generous than before, but the competition is even more intense. This is not a good thing. Don't worry. Manny, on the other hand, was brimming with confidence. With our full set of dark gold weapons, it shouldn't be difficult for us to qualify. Let's hope so. Aurora was deeply worried. She was far from being as optimistic as Manny. As the few of them chatted, Fatty would joke from time to time, making the whole atmosphere cheerful. The nervousness before the competition had also been diluted by quite a bit. Suddenly, Ron's heart felt a sense of danger. People who cultivated soul force were born with extremely sensitive antennae. He felt that he had been locked onto by a trace of faintly discernible killing intent. He turned his head and saw that the dense crowd consciously opened up a path. A team appeared from the crowd, emitting the domineering aura of an emperor, making people not dare to look up. Ron frowned. In that team, he saw two familiar people. One was Shea and the other was Kadena. The leader was a man with a scar on his face. The trace of killing intent came from him. Who is he? Do I know him? Ron carefully looked at the scarred man. He confirmed that he really did not know this person. When the scarred man saw Ron, he arrogantly smiled and walked forward. The scarred man hadn't even gotten close when Aurora shouted loudly, "Mocklin, what do you want?" At the same time, she also called out his name. Ron was startled. So he was Balrog's Academy's #1 paladin, Mocklin. Only, he didn't know why he had such an inexplicable killing intent towards him. Could it be that he was mistaken? He couldn't help but suspect. Mocklin ignored Aurora. With a smile, the scar on his face wriggled like a snake, looking extremely sinister and terrifying. "You are Ron?" "Yes." Ron took a deep breath and calmly looked him in the eye. Mocklin smiled faintly. Suddenly, his eyes flashed with killing intent. An extremely powerful aura rushed over, and the surrounding space also became extremely oppressive. Those who were weaker actually felt their legs tremble under Mocklin's powerful pressure. Kadena and Shea looked at each other, feeling strange. This should be the first time Mocklin saw Ron. Why did he show such strong hostility? Moreover, although Mocklin was strong, he was a pornographic novel. Although he was big, he kept a very low profile and did not bully the weak. Dean Dabbs. At this time, Shea saw Dean Dabbs slowly walking over and hurriedly greeted him. "You are all here." Dabbs smiled and inadvertently glanced at Mocklin. Mocklin frowned and immediately withdrew his aura. He respectfully said, "Dean Dabbs." Dabbs was still smiling. "Mocklin, what are you doing?" "Nothing." Mocklin smiled faintly. "I am just greeting my future opponent." Hearing his words, the people around him didn't think much of it. His words sounded nice, and it was just a greeting. What was that monstrous murderous aura just now? Dabbs replied with an "oh" and looked at Mocklin meaningfully. Mocklin smiled and bowed slightly. "Dean Dabbs, I still have something to do. I will take my leave first." "Okay." Dabbs smiled and nodded. Mocklin turned to Ron and said with a smile, "Although I am in the third group, I am looking forward to meeting you in the finals. I hope you will not disappoint me. It is not good to be eliminated early." "I will," Ron said calmly. Although he did not know the purpose of this person's visit, he would not back down in the face of a challenge. When Mocklin left, Dabbs looked at his back and gently touched his white beard. "The Holy Son of the Holy See, how impressive!" "Dean Dabbs, what are you talking about?" Ron saw him muttering to himself and asked. "Nothing." Dabbs smiled. "Ron, this is your first time participating in the ranking tournament. Although you are very strong, the ranking tournament is about the coordination of the overall strength. You have to be careful." "I will." Ron nodded. Dabbs smiled and turned to leave. Shea and the others also bid farewell to Ron and left. When Dabs was far away, Fatty gave a thumbs up and said, "Ron, you are too awesome. You actually dared to speak to Mocklin like that. In the entire academy, I am afraid you are the only one who dares to be so arrogant in front of him." Arrogant? Ron took a deep breath, shook his head and sighed. He is the Academy's #1 paladin, Mocklin? He is indeed very strong. I am afraid that even I may not be his opponent. At this moment Aurora came over and said, "This is strange. Ron, did you know him before? Why does he look like he can't wait to kill you?" Ron shook his head. "I don't know him. This is also the first time we met. I also don't know why he hates me so much. I don't know why, but I feel a familiar smell from him." At this moment, Homelin's shadow appeared beside Ron. Ron was a little surprised. "What is it?" "The Holy See," Homelin said with certainty. "Although I have no evidence, I believe that my feeling will not be wrong." "Mocklin, has Ron ever offended you? Why do you look like you want to kill him?" Shea could not help but ask when they arrived at the first area and found a seat to sit down. Her tone was a little dissatisfied. Mocklin smiled. "Is that so? Did I? Is it your illusion? Was it an illusion?" Shea did not believe it. From the moment Mocklin looked at Ron, she knew that it was not an illusion. Ifrit said, "Mocklin, why are you becoming more and more useless? That freshman is still a child. You actually bullied a child? Do you have any shame?" Mocklin ignored Ifrit and said to Shea with a smile, "Shea, why do I feel that you seem to care about him? Does this have anything to do with you?" "When did I?" Shea blushed and said, "No." Mocklin sneered. "I heard that Heifels wanted to find trouble with him, and you brought a group of people to support him. Is that true?" Ifrit became nervous. "Shea, is that true? So what if it is?" Shea was also angered by Mocklin's stubbornness and said loudly, "This is my business." "It's none of your business." Mocklin smiled. "I have no interest in your business, but I will not let this Ron go." Shea sighed. "Do as you wish. But I have to remind you that this Ron is not an ordinary necromancer. He is extremely powerful." Mocklin smiled and did not speak. He naturally knew how powerful the ancient necromancers were, but Mocklin was very confident in his own strength. This was his first mission as the son of the Holy See. He could not afford to fail. The two parted on bad terms. Shea left with Kadena. Ifrit wanted to chase after them, but Shea glared at him and he shrank back. The qualifiers were held in several large dueling arenas. When Ron and the others arrived, the stands were already full of people. Most of them were students of the Balarax Academy, but there were also some from other academies, such as the Soaring Dragon Academy, and residents of the Balarax city. The Balarax Academy was open to the public during the Roland Cup ranking tournament. In the 4th division, the match on the field had already begun. Ron saw a total of 16 people on both sides engaged in a fierce battle in the large duel arena. Magic was flying everywhere and combat energy was everywhere. One side used the paladin as a shield and steadily advanced, while the other side had the priest at the back. Holy white light, which symbolized healing, lit up from time to time. The battle was in a stalemate. Ron exclaimed, "Their coordination is amazing." Fatty smiled. "This is nothing. There are even better. Teamwork and tacit understanding are very important in a team battle." Chapter 130. In the stands of the first group, Kadena and Shea are sitting in the middle of the crowd, attracting many people's attention. The two's beauty is a beautiful scenery wherever they go, especially Kadena, who is known as the #1 beauty in the school. These people are so annoying. Kadena looks at those lecherous people and can't help but get angry. She wants to grab those people and beat them up. "Forget it, who asked you to look so attractive?" Shea says with a smile. Kadena is speechless. Suddenly, she blinks her eyes, looks at Shea and asks, Sister Shea, do you think Mocklin has changed a lot? Shea thoughtfully nods. Yes, but who doesn't change as time passes? Sister Shea, I found that you have changed too. Kadena thinks for a while and says with a smile. Me? How did I change? Kadena softly moves closer to Shea's ear and says, I found that you don't have much feelings for Mocklin. On the contrary, you care about Ron. Sister Shea, did you fall in love with that guy? Shea's face turns red and her ears are red. She says, Don't talk nonsense. Kadena chuckles, What nonsense? Isn't this obvious? Besides, Ron's strength is not bad. It should be foreseeable that he will break through the master level. Most importantly, that guy is only 15 years old. His future is limitless. It's not that I want to nag you, Sister Shea, but you should make a move when you need to. I heard that Ron and that Aurora are now intimate. It will be too late if you are late. Shea has no way to deal with Kadena. She suddenly looks at her with a smile that is not a smile. That's strange. Why are you so clear about Ron's matters? Seeing that you're so concerned about him, I'm afraid you've fallen for him, right? Ba ba ba. Kadena spat out her saliva exaggeratedly. Would I like that guy, who is full of evil power and can control skeletons? Hey, don't look at me like that. Fine. I admit that although he is very strong, he is definitely not my ideal husband. Oh. Shea was a little surprised and asked with a smile. Kadena, I haven't heard of him yet. What is your ideal husband? My ideal husband. Kadena thought for a while and smiled. Sister Shea, I can tell you, but you can't laugh at me. Kadena smiled and said, My ideal husband must be a noble dragon knight. Dragon knights. Shea disapprovingly said, Soaring Dragon Academy has a bunch of them. You can go to Soaring Dragon Academy and look for them. Why don't I help you find one? Kadena's face turned red. I'm not going to look for those stupid dragon knights. Then what kind of one are you looking for? Kadena's eyes revealed a look of longing. The dragon knight I'm looking for must be an indomitable and extraordinary man. He must have beautiful blonde hair, wear noble armor, and hold a long dragon spear in his hand. He must ride a flying dragon and appear in the sky while stepping on a multicolored light, coming to marry me. Kadena's hands were folded in front of her chest. Her eyes were sparkling like a pious angel standing there. Tch. Shea couldn't help but stretch out her little finger. You silly girl, you must have read too many novels. The flying dragon you are talking about, isn't that an expert of the sacred domain? The experts of the sacred domain are famous all over the world. Why would they take a fancy to a little girl like you? Even if they did, which of the experts of the sacred domain isn't above 40 or 50 years old? They would have already gotten married, why would they wait for you? Kadena's little face was already red to the ears. She rebuked, Sister Shea, don't mock me like this. Saying this, the two of them began to laugh and play around. Suddenly, Kadena's laughter stopped. She mysteriously said, Sister Shea, why don't we go to the 4th competition area to watch Ron's battle? I just saw that this afternoon, Ron's dormitory has a competition. Shea's face turned red. I'm not going. Go. I'm not going. Go. Okay. The dean of the Balarax Academy, Platz, was sitting in the middle of the stands. He was smiling as he watched all of this. His seat was the highest in the stands. It was like a tower in the middle of the 4 competition areas. At a glance, the situation of the 4 competition areas could not be seen. Perhaps it was because of the rich rewards. This year's ranking competition was very intense. Even the competition for the qualifiers was very intense. Platz was very satisfied. At this time, Dabu quickly ran over and whispered a few words in Platz's ear. Platz's face revealed an astonished expression. Really? Dabu nodded. Quickly invite him in. Platz stood up. Dabu told him that the Roland Empire's Emperor was a pornographic novel. His Majesty had arrived. An Academy's competition could actually attract the Emperor to personally come. Beside him, the Dean of the Soaring Dragon Academy, Montego, was also astonished. He smiled and said, "You old bastard's face is still so big." Beside him, the Dean of the Hanses Academy, King of Assassins Hill, sat with his eyes closed. He did not move at all. In fact, he had a panoramic view of everything around him. Platz laughed. At this time, the 32nd king of the Roland Empire, Nikolai, walked over with a smile. His Majesty Nikolai was a valiant middle-aged man. His entire body was filled with vitality. He wore casual sportswear and did not look like an emperor at all. Behind him was a beautiful woman. It was the Roland Empire's Empress Roland. Her faint expression was filled with a sense of nobility. This was the innate temperament of the royal family. Behind her was a 15 or 16-year-old girl. This was her daughter, Princess Angel. Her golden hair and blue eyes all showed that she was of noble royal blood. In addition, her white skin made her look like a porcelain doll. Princess Angel had inherited Empress Roland's beauty and was Nikolai's most beloved daughter. "Your Majesty!" Platz bowed slightly and saluted. Nikolai laughed. "Dean Platz, you are a powerhouse of the sacred domain and my teacher. I should be the one saluting you," Platz smiled. "That is to thank your Majesty for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come to Balavax and participate in our Academy's annual ceremony." Nikolai smiled and turned his head. "Dean Montegot and Dean Hill are also here. Haha. Today is a grand occasion in Balavax. Your Majesty." Montegot nodded slightly in greeting. Hill, on the other hand, did not even turn his head. Nikolai was not annoyed. Powerhouses of the sacred domain were all a little arrogant. This was normal. With their strength, there was no need for them to give face to anyone. Nikolai and his family sat down in the VIP seat. The accompanying guards stood in a formation on the side. Princess Angel sat beside Nikolai, and Empress Roland sat on the other side. As soon as they sat down, Nikolai said to his daughter, "My little princess, how long has it been since you came to the academy? I'm afraid you don't even recognize the teachers." Angel opened her eyes wide and said with grievance, "Father, who said I didn't want to go? I can't get along with those people at all. The teachers of the academy are even worse. They actually sent me to the worst dorm. I don't want to go to school anymore." Nikolai turned to Platz. "Dean Platz, my daughter is a little naughty and lazy. Sir Dean, please don't be calculative with her." Platz was a little embarrassed. As the dean, how could he care about such small matters? He could only reply, "All right, I'll get someone to adjust and send Princess Angel to the best dorm." Originally, Princess Angel was sent to a very good dorm. However, because she rarely attended classes and did not participate in the dorm ranking battles, it severely affected the fighting strength of the entire dorm. The teachers considered that she would not come anyway, so they simply sent her to the trash camp. "There's no need to go through so much trouble," Princess Angel said impatiently. "It's not like I'm learning from Grand Magus Sovereign. Anyway, Dean Platz won't teach me personally." Platz smiled bitterly. As the dean, how could he teach someone personally? Even if he wanted to teach, Angel did not have the qualifications. Nikolai pulled a long face. "Angel, don't mess around." He then turned and said, "Teacher, my daughter has been spoiled by me. Please don't take offense." Platz smiled faintly. "It's fine." At this moment, a magician wearing a black magician's robe walked up. He had a head of white hair, deep eye sockets, and a large aquiline nose. He gave off a sinister vibe as he bowed to Platz with a half-smile. "Sir Platz." Platz looked at him and said, "You must be Grand Magus Sovereign." Princess Angel was originally a student of our academy. I'll hand her over to you now. You have to teach her well and not disappoint His Majesty. In terms of strength, Grand Magus Sovereign was an entire level lower than Platts. He could only respectfully reply, "Yes, Sir Mage Saint." However, when he said this, Sovereign's eyes flashed with a trace of light. Platts nodded. The one-on-one teaching of a Grand Magus was naturally much better than learning in the academy. He was not prepared to say anything. As for Princess Angel, she could do whatever she wanted. Nikolai and Empress Rulin exchanged helpless glances. Princess Angel stuck out her tongue mischievously. Just as these important figures were conversing, a duel ended. The victors naturally cheered, while the losers hung their heads dejectedly. Nikolai watched with relish, and could not help but clap his hands. He smiled at Platts and said, "Dean Platts, this ranking battle is as intense as ever." Montegot also smiled. "The Balarax Academy is indeed full of talents." "You're too kind," Platts said modestly. It was finally afternoon, and the matches in the various regions were still ongoing. The important figures continued to watch the matches after having their meals. Next match, Dorm 302 vs. Dorm 408. The magic loudspeaker sounded at the right time in the huge duel arena. Ron took a deep breath, his eyes shining. Finally, it's time to fight. Homeland's projection stood beside him, his expression full of concern and encouragement. "Do your best, Ron. This is the first time necromancy has truly appeared in front of the world since its disappearance. Remember, you can't lose face for necromancy." "I understand, Grandpa." Ron's eyes were filled with determination. "I definitely won't lose face for necromancy." At this moment, Fatty said, "Ron, it's our turn now." Aurora nodded. "Let's work hard together. Do your best." The 7 of them formed a circle and stretched out their hands, shouting with all their might. Chapter 131. In the stands, the black-clothed Grand Magus Sovereign suddenly said, "Your Highness, this room 302 seems to be the trash camp that you used to stay in." Angel stood up to take a look. "Wasn't that right?" The one walking in front was the annoying Fatty, and that pair of trash siblings. Then there was Aurora and Manny. Manny was average, but Aurora was very strong. Yes, I see familiar faces," Angel said with a smile. 7 people, One more than when I was here. No wonder they were last." Nicholas softly said, "Oh." Actually, he was a little dissatisfied in his heart. Angel was still a princess of the Empire. Wasn't it too much to put her in such a dormitory? Who could bear the shame of being at the bottom of the ranking tournament? However, now that Princess Angel was learning magic under Grand Magus Sovereign, he felt a bit more at ease. Pratt glanced at Sovereign with dissatisfaction. It was this annoying Grand Magus who seemed to be trying to sow discord by bringing up this matter in front of His Majesty. "I already agreed to help Princess Angel change rooms, but she didn't want to go. What more do you want?" Nikolai didn't say it out loud and only smiled. "The other side has 8 people and they only have 7. Isn't it certain that they'll lose?" "That might not be the case." Angel tilted her head and smiled. "That Aurora is still very strong, but it's useless if she's the only one. Among the others, the Fatty and the pair of siblings are trash. Manny's strength is alright, but she's not that strong. There's actually a priest. Not bad," Angel said excitedly. She was very familiar with room 302. After all, she had stayed there before. "That's right, who's that little black-haired guy? Is he new?" Pratt smiled. "That's Ron, a necromancer." "Princess Angel, you're right, he's a new student." "Necromancer?" Angel cried out. "This kind of trash is studying at the academy? Heavens, I'm going crazy." Grand Magus Sovereign gave a sinister smile. "It really is worthy of being a waste concentration camp. Princess Angel, you were right not to come here to study." Princess Angel was talking about Dorm 302, but Sovereign was referring to the entire academy. Everyone could tell what he was implying. Montego, Hill, and the other important figures all looked over. What an arrogant fellow! Sophron was terrified. The other party was a world-renowned fire mage saint, while he was only a grand magus. There were some things that couldn't be said, but he quickly calmed down. His Majesty was here, so what could he do to him? Then Platz laughed, and suddenly his eyes lit up. Plop! Sophron trembled as if he had been struck by lightning, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Serves you right. Montegot smiled slightly. He thought to himself that a grand magus actually dared to boast shamelessly in front of the warlock saint. This lesson was considered light. Fortunately, you didn't provoke me. Otherwise, I would definitely make you suffer, regardless of who you are in the Roland royal family. Hill casually waved his hand. I don't know what's wrong with the weather, but it's stuffy and hot. The most annoying thing is that there are some insects flying around. It's ruining our mood. Seeing this, Sophron could only swallow his words. Who told him to have such a cheap mouth? In the royal family, he was a respected Grand Magus and Princess Angel's personal magic consultant. Anyone who saw him had to give him some face. This had nurtured his arrogant character, and he didn't put anyone in his eyes. But in front of the three sanctuary powerhouses, he was nothing. He was the kind of person who could be casually crushed to death. At this moment, Sophron finally understood that in front of the absolute power of the sacred domain powerhouses, the so-called secular power was just a joke. Apart from the excited angel, everyone knew that Sophron had suffered a loss. Platz didn't do anything else. He just wanted to teach Sophron a lesson. Nikolai saw all of this, but he acted as if he didn't see it. Sophron knew that he was powerful, so he quickly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, took a step back, and didn't say anything else. Dorm 408, opposite Ron, was a standard combat team. There was a fully armed knight, 2 warriors, 2 mages, 1 thief, 1 archer, and 1 priest. It was a powerful lineup. Are they from Dorm 302, which is ranked at the bottom? The leader of the team, the knight, smiled. There are only 7 of them. A blue-haired warrior laughed. They have 7 people, and we have a standard formation of 8. We'll win for sure. Another mage said, but among them, there's Ron who claims to be able to fight against 100 alone. Ron? The horseman mounted a yellow warhorse, his face betraying a sleepless look. Those idiots blew up the corridor and got injured because they were buried in it. Fighting 1 against 100 is a joke. The archer beside him said worriedly, That's Aurora. I'm no match for her. The knight pondered for a moment before saying, Aurora is very strong, but she alone won't be able to make any big waves. In a moment, we will press forward with our full formation and defeat them with lightning speed. The knight's face was full of confidence. Both teams had arrived, and a teacher walked over expressionlessly. I'll now announce the rules of the competition. Firstly, killing is strictly prohibited. Those who kill will be disqualified from the competition and expelled from the school. Secondly, those who relentlessly pursue an injured opponent who is unable to resist will be disqualified from the competition. Thirdly, the use of healing potions and MP potions during the competition is strictly prohibited. Once discovered, the competition will be disqualified. The teacher held a piece of paper in his hand and announced the rules of the competition. Ron and the others already knew, but they still listened attentively. I now announce the start of the competition. Following the teacher's announcement, the atmosphere in the arena suddenly became tense. Both sides took out their weapons. At this moment, something strange happened. Most of the weapons that the team from room 408 took out were either sky blue or aquamarine weapons. There was only 1 gold weapon, and basically none of them were dark gold weapons. However, all the weapons that the team from room 302 took out were dark gold weapons. The appearance of the dark gold weapons left everyone dumbfounded, and a commotion broke out among the students. Dark gold, damn, they're all dark gold weapons! This dorm team is too rich. No way, isn't that dorm 302's team that ranked last in the ranking tournament? They actually dared to spend so much money. It wasn't just the students who didn't believe it. Even the big shots in the stands were stunned. Nikolai coughed and asked, Dean Prats, what's going on? Didn't you say that they're the dorm team that ranked last? They're actually all dark gold weapons. The more dorms like this, the better. This. Prats's eyes looked at Dabu. Dabu shook his head. He also didn't know what was going on. Angel's face was filled with disbelief. No way, they actually, even Fatty's daggers are dark gold. This is too wasteful. King of Assassins Hill laughed and said to Prats with a smile, a dorm like this ranked last? Prats, if you don't mind, why don't you transfer your entire dorm to our Hans Academy? Yeah. Montygot also laughed. If you come to our Soaring Dragon Academy, we can't wait to welcome you. Your Balarax Academy is too wasteful of talents. Montygot and Hill's eyes were very sharp. If a dorm team could take out dark gold weapons, and Vice Dean Dabu didn't know anything, then the answer was obvious. Among the 7 people on the other side, at least one of them was an enchanter, and a peak enchanter at that. Otherwise, it wouldn't explain how they could suddenly take out 7 dark gold weapons. Enchanters, this was something that every power in the Noah continent would fight over. Especially peak enchanters, their value was terrifyingly high. Prats himself knew what was going on. He laughed and scolded, You two, don't have any ideas about my students. Be careful that I don't recognize you. The two giggled and didn't say anything. Nikolai also showed interest in Ron and the others. If he could pull that enchanter over, it would be great. In the corner of the stands there were 2 sneaky figures. They were Shea and Kadena. Sister Shea, they actually all have dark gold weapons. Kadena said in surprise. Shea stared at Ron. There must be an extremely outstanding enchanter among them. Kadena thought for a moment. No need to ask, it should be Ron. Shea nodded. He's always been a mystery to us. It should be him. Damn it, he actually didn't tell us that he's an enchanter, Shea said indignantly. Kadena widened her eyes and asked, Sister Shea, you're not familiar with Ron. Why should he tell you? Also, you didn't ask. Shea was speechless. Sister Shea, who do you think will win between the 2 dorm teams? Kadena smiled and asked. Although Ron's dorm has 1 less person, but Ron will definitely win, Shea said without hesitation. In the arena, the members of Dorm 408 were shocked. Boss, they all have dark gold weapons, a magician said in a trembling voice. The knight gritted his teeth. It's useless. With their strength, they can't unleash the true power of dark gold weapons. He waved his hand. Go, take them down. As he said that, the earth do-chi on his body exploded. Then, he took the lead and charged forward. The 4 hooves of his warhorse were raised like an indestructible chariot. Do it! Chapter 132. Kill! Dormitory 408 took the lead in attacking. The knight in the middle rode a yellow warhorse and rushed towards Ron and the others with him as the center. The warriors, mages, and archers behind him followed one after another. An invisible murderous aura spread out and pressed down on Dorm 302 from all directions. Lantry, take the lead! Aurora yelled and started the battle. Lantry held a huge round shield in his hand and wore a thick plate armor. Only a pair of dark eyes could be seen from his cold helmet. He charged towards the horse that was charging towards him. Boom! The entire dueling ground slightly shook. The 2 knights were like 2 tanks crashing into each other. The clash of do-chi caused a loud noise. At this time, a figure was sent flying backward for more than 10 meters before coming to a stop. Lantry struggled to get up with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It was clear that he had lost this knight versus knight competition. The opposing knight sneered. You're just a novice. How dare you call yourself a knight when you don't even have a horse? Lantry's defeat was not without reason. His opponent was strong and had a mount. With the special characteristics of the knight class, riding a mount would increase one's power by 30%. Lantry's defeat was inevitable. Lantry, are you all right? Ron helped him up. I'm fine. This is nothing. Although Lantry was not strong, he had a strong mind. This was the final quality of a knight. Let me see what you're capable of. Manny's eyes flashed with anger. She held the dark gold fury single-handed sword in her hand and blocked the pressure from the opposing knight. As a swordsman, she played the role of a knight most of the time. Every thrust of her sword was accompanied by a strong fiery light. From afar, she looked like a fire beauty. Let's go! Fatty shouted. He raised his daggers and rushed out. The entire team from room 302 rushed forward and started fighting with the team from room 408. For a moment, combat aura and magic spells flew everywhere. The whole arena flashed with light. Aurora's face was cold. She kept shooting arrows from her bow. She was very fast and quickly suppressed the opposing archer. In terms of archery, Aurora was not afraid of anyone. Oh no, I got an arrow in my knee! The opposing archer cried out. At this time, a holy white light shone and the archer's injury was quickly healed. Damn it! Aurora cursed fiercely, but she did not stop. She shot out a string of magic arrows in rapid succession. On the stands, Nikolai smiled. They're fighting well. That's a little exaggerated. Apart from the fact that they're a little weak, their fighting spirit and cooperation are unparalleled. Pratt smiled. You're too kind, Your Majesty. At this time, a knight in the arena shouted, split them up and focus on eliminating them. Cut off their connection with each other. With this sentence, the battle quickly changed. Due to the disadvantage in numbers and strength, room 302 was always at a disadvantage. This difference could not be made up by equipment. Room 302 was bitterly holding on. Ron's mission was to suppress the two opposing magicians. This was not an easy task. At this time, two warriors appeared in front of him. One of the warriors smiled. Necromancer. I heard that it's a long-range class. How about we fight him in close combat? The other warrior laughed. That's what I was thinking. Let's take him down in one fell swoop. Ron held the heavy bone staff in his hand. It emitted a faint golden light. He had never been so confident. Slowly raising the bone staff, Ron's eyes emitted a faint green flame. The black soul energy on his body kept entwining, like the angry roar of the Grim Reaper. Undead hidden in hell, your soul is tormented in endless sleep. In order to break free from the shackles of depression, break free from the shackles of your soul, awaken. Slumbering soul, awaken. My brave soldiers, accept my call and vanish from my sight. After chanting an incantation, Ron raised the bone staff in his hand. His soul energy turned into a whirlpool. Then, countless plates of black soil appeared on the ground. The black soil seemed to have opened a passage to hell. Countless undead poured out from it. Skeleton warriors. Rows of heavily armored skeleton warriors holding huge bone shields scrambled out from the ground. They were like corpses that had been sleeping for many years suddenly awakened. They let out a cry that terrified their enemies. Be careful, these skeletons are not easy to deal with. The knight captain of room 408 reminded loudly. Skeletons, those things are complete trash. In the stands, Angel laughed and pointed at the arena. Room 302 is indeed a gathering place for trash. Even necromancers have come out, Prats smiled faintly. He did not refute. Others might not know, but he knew that Ron, an ancient necromancer, was not simple at all. At least, he was not weak among those of the same class. Something's not right. Hill, the king of assassins, frowned. His closed eyes suddenly opened. Those skeletons are giving off a strange aura. They are not easy to deal with. Just as Hill, the king of killers, had said, the skeleton warriors were not simple at all. Ron pointed with his bone staff, and the brave warriors who were not afraid of death crazily rushed towards the two standing warriors. "Smash these skeletons!" the warrior from room 408 shouted. His fighting aura erupted. He waved his two-handed sword, the tip turning into a ball of silver light as he rushed towards the skeleton warriors. Boom! The skeleton warrior raised his shield to block the attack, but was forced back a few steps. Another skeleton warrior took the place of the first skeleton warrior and attacked the skeleton warrior. Pornographic novels. Under Ron's command, the skeleton warriors began their counterattack. Close to 10 skeleton warriors formed a shield wall and surrounded the two warriors. Those with discerning eyes could see that the two warriors were in a bad situation. These skeleton warriors were extremely powerful, and their defense was ridiculously high. Under the attack of the opponent's fighting aura and magic, they actually managed to withstand it. Everyone was stunned. Heavens, these skeletons are too strong. This is ancient necromancy magic. It's said that Ron is a true ancient necromancer. So powerful. Do your best, Ron. Many students began to cheer for Ron. Amazing. Hill finally opened his eyes and looked at Ron's figure. He nodded as if he wanted to remember him. This is the first time I've seen such powerful necromancy magic. But I want to ask, is this really necromancy magic? What? This necromancer is actually so powerful. Those skeletons can actually use shields to block? And they even blocked it. Heavens! This world is too crazy. Angel couldn't believe her eyes. Monty got frowned. Prats, what's going on? Aren't necromancers supposed to be trash that can't withstand a single blow? Now this. Hill smiled and looked at the confident Prats. I think Dean Prats definitely knows what's going on. That's right. Prats smiled and pointed at Ron. This isn't necromancy magic, but ancient necromancy magic. That youth here has inherited ancient necromancy magic. Ancient necromancy magic. Everyone's eyes widened. This was too inconceivable. Monty got scratched his head and said, does ancient necromancy magic really exist? Did necromancy magic really exist in ancient times? Isn't it just a legend? Yes. Prats nodded and calmly said, very good. Hill slowly closed his eyes and didn't say a word. Although he was very interested in ancient necromancers, Ron's strength was nothing in the eyes of the powerhouses of the sacred domain. This was the first time that ancient necromancy magic had truly appeared in front of the world. The valiant and fearless skeletons had left a deep impression on everyone. The necromancy magic that had disappeared 100,000 years ago had finally revealed its true form to the world. Homeland's projection stood in the field and looked at Ron's heroic figure. A trace of gratification flashed across his face. He raised his head and looked at the high stands where 3 powerhouses of the sacred domain were sitting. Just you wait. In the near future, Ron will definitely step into the sacred domain like you and restore the glory of the Scourge Church. At this moment, the knight of dormitory 408 shouted, don't get entangled with those skeletons. Kill Ron, he's the real deal. The 2 warriors seemed to have woken up from a dream. They raised their weapons and charged at Ron. The knight also broke free from Manny's entanglement and charged at Ron. Aurora cried out in alarm, Ron, be careful! They're all coming for you. At this moment, Ron was riding on the back of a skeletal warrior. The bone spear condensed in his hand suddenly pierced out, using offense as defense. At this moment, he was very proficient in close combat. Ordinary warriors were no longer a threat to him. Boom! 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 The bone spear and the knight's sword collided, bursting out large amounts of sparks. Both sides exchanged blows back and forth, happily fighting. Damn it, his close combat is actually so powerful. The knight became more and more alarmed. He exchanged several blows with Ron, but he couldn't do anything to him. At this moment, the two warriors of Dormitory 408 had already charged forward. "Quick, go support Ron," Aurora anxiously said. "Okay," Manny replied. The flame beauty turned around and rushed towards Ron. "Don't worry about me, I can handle it. You go and deal with the others." Ron's dull voice sounded in everyone's ears. "Aurora, this." Manny was at a loss. On one hand, she wanted to help. On the other hand, Ron was the captain. She didn't know who to listen to. "This guy likes to show off." Aurora fiercely gritted her teeth. "He's the captain, listen to him." You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.